Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm, and you are watching What If Naruto Unleashed an Ancient Darkness in the Forgotten Temple. If you enjoy this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
Beams of light flitted into the high open windows of the Hokage's office as the day broke brightly in the village hidden in the leaves. What it revealed was the seemingly endless piles of papers scattered carelessly on the desk and floor of the blonde woman who was now in charge of Konoha. Despite using chakra techniques to enhance her youthful appearance and blonde hair, the Hokage was attractive. She was now over 50, but her face fooled everyone. No one could dispute that she was a strong leader and that her spirit was full of fire, despite the fact that many criticized her messy ways and bad habits. Her brow was furrowed in concentration as her brown eyes scanned a sheet she was holding. Shizune, her assistant, stood beside her, staring at the three shinobi in the middle of the room. They were all waiting to find out why they were there, but they knew it was for a significant reason. Shizune looked at her longtime friend and smiled empathetically. She had a lot of respect for Lady Tsunade, but she was also aware of how annoying she could be at times. Tsunade abruptly turned to face the trio of ninjas in front of her. The steely gaze fell upon her, and one jumped. The other two gazed up languidly. She continued to look intently at the three people in front of her as she said, "This season has been very hard on the villages and farms surrounding the Leaf Village. There has been a strain of illness hitting the farms, and so Sakura and Ino, accompanied by Sai, are making rounds, tending to the sick." The ninja to Tsunade's right said, Ino is happy about that, I bet." With his hands in his pockets, he shrugged and slouched. His narrow eyes looked at Tsunade with indifference, and his dark hair was pulled back with a band. But Tsunade gave him a gloomy look, and he recoiled, murmuring that this was a drag. Kiba has been asked by his mother and sister to help train some ninja hounds, and Shino is helping his father develop some new technique involving insects. The small girl ninja in the middle grinned when she learned about her teammates and was pleased that they could use their skills to support their families. She looked to her left, where the ninja with the dark hair spoke once more, "And what about Choji?" Tsunade winced. It was his father's birthday yesterday, and they had a barbecue to celebrate it. He gave a knowing sigh and rolled his eyes. "Oh man." A loud, contagious laugh came from the ninja to Tsunade's left. A new sound. The blonde boy was laughing so hard that he was holding his stomach. He kept laughing as he said, "That's Choji for ya. He's probably in the hospital recovering from a stomach pumping." It was necessary for even the bashful Kunoichi in the center to smile. The misfits in front of her made Tsunade grit her teeth. She slammed her fist down on the table when she yelled, "Enough!" The three ninja in front of her suddenly leapt and formed a line in front of her. Tsunade got up from her desk and leaned in their direction as though to frighten them even more. "You are the only shinobi I can spare at the moment for the mission that has just came in. It's of utmost importance that we send someone as soon as possible. We have a missing person." "A missing person?" inquired the boy with the blonde hair. "That sounds important?" Tsunade's eyes narrowed. "Of course it's important. The missing person's partner, an archaeologist, just arrived here late last night after running here from an archaeological site, discovered recently up in the mountain ranges to the northeast. It's a day's run, no breaks." The Kunoichi had a worried expression. "Is the archaeologist okay?" "He's fine, but he's extremely worried for his partner, who went missing while exploring the temple that was found. The only thing remaining is a brush she used to wipe away dust, and she couldn't have escaped from the temple, because he was working in the main hall. This is an A-rank mission. You'll need to leave immediately." The humor of the situation prevented any antics, and the three ninja nodded their understanding. "Naruto Uzumaki, Hinata Hyuga, Shikamaru Nara," she said to the ninjas from left to right, and nodded. "You will set out for the Starless Mountain Range, accompanied by the archaeologist who asked for this mission, and I expect you to come home with the good news that you found the missing archaeologist. Shikamaru is team leader, so you obey his orders. Understood?" They gave a nod. "Yes." Tsunade grinned. "Good." Shizune nodded and walked out of the room. As she turned to face him, Shikamaru straightened up and spoke to the Hokage as the door closed behind her. "If you don't mind me asking," he said, "what archaeological site are we talking about?" "The Starless Mountain Ranges are mountains that are so high that no one has ever been known to climb them. In return, a constant mist covers the top of the peaks, so the general area is dangerous and unknown." "Where on the mountains was this temple found?" Tsunade gave a shrug. "I'm not completely sure. All I know is that this temple is somewhere in the mountainside. It's not all the way up, so it is accessible, but hard to locate, which is why Haruki Kimura will be going with you. He's the archaeologist. What I can tell you is that what has been found in the ruins is very intriguing. I think that you'll be very interested in what's there." Shikamaru. Shizune came back as she was saying this, a man following her. The man had brown eyes and auburn hair, and he was only in his 20s. He had a tanned face from being in the sun for many days. Despite his good looks, he exuded intelligence, and his level of fitness was also impressive. He appeared to be able to manage himself quite well, but his eyes were filled with urgency, and he appeared extremely exhausted. Tsunade said, "And this is Haruki Kimura. These are the ninja who will be going with you. Meet Naruto Uzumaki, Hinata Hyuga, and Shikamaru Nara." Haruki gave Hinata a long look before blushing and turning away as she introduced the ninja. The exchange went unnoticed. Tsunade went on, "They may look young, but I have full belief that they will help you find Akiko." He gave a shaky smile. "I hope so, Lady Hokage. How long until we head off?" She looked at the ninja and said, "In half an hour. Go home and get your stuff, meet Haruki at the north entrance, and head off." Go. Together, the three said, "Right," and then scattered like shadows. Each set off with their own thoughts, with Naruto's excitement to finally embark on a mission more significant than chasing the daimyo's wife's cat, Hinata's joy at embarking on a mission with Naruto, and Shikamaru's normally bored expression taking on a thoughtful one as he imagined the ancient ruins. Standing at the big wooden gates of the Hidden Leaf Village with Hinata and Haruki, Shikamaru remarked, "Naruto's late as usual. What a drag." Angrily, he raised his pack higher on his shoulders. As he paced back and forth, Haruki remarked, "He better get here soon. This is important. We need to find Akiko as soon as we can. Who knows what may have happened to her." Hinata gave Haruki a pitying glance with a gentle and comforting tone. She said, "Don't worry, Haruki. Naruto will arrive any moment, and then we can leave." Haruki sighed in exasperation and kept pacing, saying, "I hope so." He still had signs of weariness on his face, but they didn't seem to bother him. But then he stopped and stared at Hinata once more. Hinata pretended not to notice as he narrowed his eyes at her, almost suspiciously. With the exception of pale lilac irises, her eyes were nearly pure white, a well-known bloodline trait that placed her family in close proximity to nobles in the Hidden Leaf Village. She typically received strange looks from others. She concluded that this was the only reason Haruki was staring at her twice. After a few seconds, Haruki started pacing again, but was stopped when Naruto was seen sprinting toward them while yelling something incomprehensible at them. Hinata saw him and grinned. "See, Haruki? There he comes." Naruto was running toward Shikamaru and Haruki as they turned back to face the village. Then he tripped and fell flat on his face. He straightened himself, still grinning, just as Hinata was about to go check on him. "Hey guys. Sorry I'm late. I just had to run to the store to pick up some food." With a frown darkening his features, Haruki said, Yes, you're here now." He straightened the pack he had received from the Hokage, turned away from Konoha, and started at a run angling northeast. "Now that we're all here, we can head out now. Just follow me and keep up. We need to cover a lot of ground today if we want to even make it to the bottom of the mountains by tomorrow, and then we have to hike upwards all day." The three of them were caught off guard by his rash actions. When Naruto finally caught up to Hinata and Shikamaru, who were now beginning to leave after the already disappearing man, he called out, "Hey, wait Haruki. Man, he's rude," Naruto thought, frowning. "What's with this guy?" When Shikamaru finally caught up to Haruki, he said, "We need to conserve our energy. If we rush like this, we'll be tired before we reach the mountain base." "I won't tire," he said, continuing his frantic pace, "so it's up to you to keep up. We can't waste any time being slow when Akiko could be in danger." Naruto bounced in front of Shikamaru, beaming from ear to ear, just as he started to argue. "You can bet we won't tire. We'll keep up no matter how long you run. Just watch us. Come on guys. Let's show him what Konoha Shinobi can do." As Naruto and a patient Hinata passed him, Shikamaru arched an eyebrow. He scowled at Naruto's actions but said nothing more because he knew that timid Hinata wouldn't voice her displeasure. The mission had only been underway for a few minutes when things started to spiral out of control. As he followed his friends deeper into the woods, he murmured to himself, "What a drag," until he reached the distant shadows of the mountains. The four travelers were able to stay very close to the rapid pace that Haruki and Naruto had set at the beginning, even through the thickest part of the forest that stood in their way. As a result, they were able to clear the woodlands before Shikamaru had anticipated. The three Konoha shinobi were shocked by what they saw when the last of the forests had thinning and broken. They had witnessed many breathtaking vistas, including mountains, but nothing compared to what lay ahead. For roughly an hour and a half, they ran through flat grasslands, but the biggest mountain they had ever seen rose up in the distance like a huge tree. Its roots, which were stony gray in color, extended for what seemed like miles in all directions. It shot up into a huge hanging cloud of light gray-purple mist. Spreading both outward and upward, the mountains appeared to stretch for miles in every direction, farther than the eye could see. It was nearly too much. Still gasping from the strenuous running pace, Hinata swallowed. She lifted her head and closed her eyes intently, saying, "Oh wow, we have to climb up those." She activated her unique bloodline trait with a hand gesture. She uttered the words, Byakugan. Naruto and Shikamaru saw her eyes focus and the veins surrounding them swell. Both of them were aware that she was able to see things that they would never be able to. What's up, Hinata? Naruto asked, observing her intently and marveling at her skills. Do you see the temple yet? No, she said, slowly looking around the area. I can't see past the haze up there or anything really. They turned to face Haruki, who was also beginning to catch his breath, and said, Of course she can't. He was clearly exhausted and used his hands to support his knees. Haruki's inability to maintain his own pace was the one thing the Konoha ninja were unable to say about him. He was able to keep up with the well-rested, well-trained youths despite a tiring descent of the mountain. Naruto, however, still felt that he was rude and interpreted the comment as disparaging Hinata's skills. What's that supposed to mean? He got up and stretched his shoulders by waving his arms in circles. The temple is on the other side of the second mountain. Even if she were aligned with the right side, she would have trouble spotting it. He looked up at the sky and said, Well, that's enough of a break. The sun had only just begun to set across the sky. There were only a few hours of light remaining because it was only about mid-afternoon. We can make it partway up the mountain if we hurry. Shikamaru hurried ahead of him and stopped him just as he was ready to take off. Listen, as team leader, it's my responsibility that we don't all get killed before we even get to the site of the mission. If we start climbing after such an exhausting run, we will be putting ourselves in danger. Haruki's features were filled with anger. Now look here. Shikamaru interrupted him, his discipline and resolve clear in his voice. No, you listen. As he watched his slothful friend assume leadership, Naruto was impressed. Although he was aware of Shikamaru's great tactical genius, he had not been on a mission under his command since they attempted to rescue Sasuke, and he was taken aback by his leadership abilities. You've already set us at a very swift pace that just works to make us more tired. If we try and climb these mountains as we are, then we may not be able to keep ourselves from falling, or from helping someone else, especially you ran all last night. I'm surprised you're still standing. It would be wise if we stayed at a low altitude tonight, so we can rest properly and start again tomorrow, first light. Haruki didn't want to listen. You don't understand, he exclaimed, his voice growing passionate by the end of his speech. He was screaming and on the verge of tears. Akiko is lost somewhere in those mountains, and in who knows how much danger. That temple is a strange place, and the mountains even stranger. If she got lost somewhere in either, her life is very much in danger, and I just can't wait here. Knowing that Haruki's judgment was tainted by worry, Shikamaru appeared unimpressed by the man's eloquence despite Hinata's intense sympathy for him. Before he could respond to Haruki, Naruto moved beside him and put a reassuring hand on Haruki's shoulder. Listen to Shikamaru, he knows what he's doing. If he's leading our mission, you have nothing to fear. We'll find Akiko. Shikamaru gave Naruto a startled look before grinning. Thanks. Naruto looked, Haruki, he turned to his companion, if Akiko is lost in the mountains, we still have time to find her. I assume, being able to get up there in the first place, that she can take care of herself also. She's only been missing since yesterday, because you made such a quick trip to Konoha. If we rest tonight and set out tomorrow, we can make the temple by tomorrow afternoon, and spend all the rest of the day searching. She'll have only been missing for 2 days. He stopped and went on. Our chances of finding her, thanks to Hinata and her eyes, are high, very high. Haruki merely nodded numbly to Shikamaru's remarks, appearing placated for the moment. Shikamaru looked at Naruto and Hinata. Okay, here's the plan. We'll let Haruki lead us to the closest spot on the mountain base to the temple, then set up camp for the night. We rest, and then start the climb tomorrow as soon as there's light enough. In response, Hinata said, Got it, right on, Shikamaru. Naruto exclaimed with a radiant smile. He hurried off to join Haruki, who was silently preparing to make the journey to the mountain base, leaving Hinata and a bewildered Shikamaru in his wake. This is how a mission is led. He looked in her direction. She turned to hear Shikamaru say, Hey, Hinata? In a voice that was too quiet for Naruto to hear. Have you noticed something odd about Naruto on this mission? As was his custom, she turned to watch Naruto assist Haruki in getting ready while he drank water from a bottle in a hyperactive manner. She grinned. Not really, Shikamaru. What do you notice? Shikamaru gave a shy smile. It's nothing, I guess, but Naruto doesn't seem to me to be the type to take authority very well. He certainly didn't when we last went out on a mission I led, but this time he's respecting my position as team leader, giving support, and he stopped and searched for the right words. Hinata simply gave a shrug. While Hinata was speaking, Shikamaru observed Naruto and said, He's just grown up since he's returned. He's different from the boy who left Konoha 3 years ago. Since he's returned, and with all that's happened with Akatsuki and Sasuke, he's just matured. I'm sure you can recognize it if you look for it. She grinned arrogantly. Shikamaru simply grinned and arched an eyebrow. He was able to see through her Fa Section aid, and he was somewhat taken aback by the fact that her childhood crush on Naruto had not lessened while he was away. Shikamaru and Hinata turned to see Haruki shouting at Naruto as he gathered fluffy white flower pollen from the ground and tossed it into Haruki's wind-blown hair, making him appear to have rolled in a sheep wool pen. "Naruto! Stop that!" they exclaimed before Haruki cuffed him in the back of his head and sent him flying in a heap. Naruto was almost giggling uncontrollably. Hinata shook her head and flushed. Shikamaru let out a sigh. "Some things never change, I guess." They tried not to use too much energy and moved slowly across the field. Even before the sun disappeared behind the forest to the west, the sky began to darken as the wind increased and dark storm clouds began to form. Even Hinata's Byakugan had little time to prepare for the bad weather, which had seemingly appeared out of nowhere before the storm hit full force. Naruto had hurried off to find water to replenish their pouches, promising to catch up as soon as possible in search of cover. The other three had begun to ascend the first few levels when the first few drops of rain started to fall from the ground. They had just reached the top of the first stone layers. It soon turned into a driving rainstorm. Shikamaru shielded his eyes from the rain by lifting his arm above his head, but the wind continued to blow in his face. He roared over the storm, looking towards the kunoichi. "Use your Byakugan, and see if you can find any place for us to go. We need to get out of this storm," he called to Hinata and Haruki, "before we're completely soaked and frozen." Her eyes refocused after she nodded. She looked at what appeared to be a mountain wall before stopping, saying, "I'll try." "There." She gestured toward the right and upward from their current position. "There's a large cavern in the wall only a few feet over there. It's opposite the wind, so we should stay relatively dry." "Perfect." With a sigh of relief, he turned to see Naruto scurrying up to their location while carrying water pouches over his shoulder. "Naruto, come on, we have to get up there and out of this storm." The rain flattened Naruto's normally spiky hair as he jogged to them. The drops blew into his eyes, causing him to squint. "Agreed, this storm is only going to get worse. If we try and get too much higher, we'll be killed." Despite his grunt, Haruki continued to follow his friends as they cautiously and swiftly made their way to the cavern from somewhere near where they were climbing. They heard a low rumbling as they made the short ascent. The group quickly scanned their surroundings in an attempt to identify the source of the noise. Pebbles fell to the ground as Hinata glanced up and sideways. She yelled, "Watch out, everyone! There are rocks up there that are unstable with the rains." The cliffside they were clinging to trembled as she spoke, and Haruki's wet hands abruptly lost their hold, causing him to begin a fatal fall backwards. Hinata let out a gasp. She called his name, "Haruki." And Shikamaru and Naruto turned to look back in shock. Naruto made the signs and made a clone of himself. His eyes narrowed determinedly, his reflexes sharpened. Pushing him with the clone, sending Naruto hurtling toward the falling man at a speed greater than gravity. He reached out, uncertain whether he would even reach his comrade, his heart thumping in time with the rain on his body. With great effort, he leaned back towards the cliff with Haruki after feeling the fingers of his left hand encircle his wrist as his other hand grabbed hold of a straggling tree root. Naruto congratulated himself on finding what he was searching for. Naruto and Haruki were brought to a halt with a sickening popping sound and a painful jerk, and they swung precariously on the root. Buffeted by the rain, Naruto's shoulder burned with pain, and he gasped. Hinata exclaimed, "Naruto!" as she and Shikamaru deftly ascended to their location. "Are you okay?" With a grunt, Naruto raised Haruki to the ledge where the others were standing with his strong arms. "I will be when you get me up to the cave." After assisting Haruki in getting back onto the slope, Hinata and Shikamaru assisted Naruto in easing himself off the branch and onto the cliff while Hinata remained behind to assist Naruto. Shikamaru and Haruki ascended. He winced every time he moved his right shoulder, and she watched him with concern. "Naruto, are you sure you're okay?" He grinned as he turned to face her. He made her smile despite being completely soaked, with water running down his face, clothes, and hair in a flattened mess. "Sure, I'll be fine once we get into a nice warm place. You don't need to worry about me." Hinata's smile dimmed a little as he climbed again and winced again. "Okay, Naruto, even if you're alright, when we get somewhere dry I'll still take a look at your shoulder for you, okay?" Naruto nodded while casting a sheepish glance down. "Okay, that sounds good, even though I don't need it, if it will give you peace of mind." "It will." Naruto gave her another smile. "Then I will happily be your patient." Hinata reddened silently. They ascended further. They arrived at the cave without experiencing any more difficulties. As soon as they were inside, Hinata started examining Naruto's wound while Shikamaru and Haruki started building a fire for warmth. As she pulled the first aid kit out of her pack, he complained, "I'm telling you, Hinata, I'm fine. You don't have to go through all of this trouble for something like this." She took a break from her work to give him the most stern look she could. Perhaps, but as you said, I'm doing this for my own peace of mind as well. I don't want your injury to affect the mission, or worsen so that your arm becomes useless. Naruto let out a resigned sigh. You're persistent, you know that? Hinata grinned, but she froze when she noticed Naruto beginning to remove his soaked shirt and jacket. She tried to suppress the sudden warmth that was creeping into her ears and cheeks because she knew she couldn't really look at his shoulder unless he showed it to her naked. When she said she would take care of his injury, she had forgotten that. Hinata swallowed as he gently carried the black t-shirt he wore over his head while nursing his shoulder. Those who had previously ridiculed Naruto's size were unable to do so. Hours of rigorous training had sculpted his body into a lean and fit shape. His strength was demonstrated by the distinct lines of his muscles. She forced herself to look away, toward his shoulder, and closed her eyes as she did. She noticed that her gaze was drawn to his powerful jaw, neck, and collarbone curve. Hinata pulled her gaze to Naruto's face, which was observing her with interest, and asked, "How does it look?" She squeaked. "Huh?" He whispered, "I didn't think it was that bad." "Oh right." His shoulder, it did appear worse than he had made it seem to her when she glanced to his right side. His shoulder had turned a sickly purplish black and was swollen. Instead of observing the mesmerizing ripple of his shoulder and back muscles, she walked over and gently flexed his shoulder, forcing herself to concentrate in order to find out if his shoulder was dislocated. She gazed into his eyes, satisfied that it was not dislocated. She grabbed her kid and pressed her eyes to his shoulder like glue, saying, "It looks to have been just badly bruised." She chose not to explain why he did so because she did not want to talk about the nine-tailed fox living inside of him. "I'll bandage it, but I think you'll be able to continue by tomorrow, especially since you seem to heal so quickly." Because of the suffering the beast had caused Naruto, she detested it. Naruto gave her a smile. She grinned at his remark and began to put her hand on his shoulder, saying, "Thanks Hinata. You're really good at this." She cautiously wrapped the bandages around his neck and chest, moving them back and forth without letting her fingers rest on his flesh. He began to speak again as she did so. "You are really good at this first aid thing. You know, it makes me wonder, why didn't you become a medical ninja like Sakura and Ino?" She was surprised by the question. She began, "Oh well, I never really thought about it." She kept her hand around his shoulder. "I guess it was because I had already found out what purpose I had as a ninja." That comment intrigued Naruto, though he wasn't positive. He had a hazy suspicion that he knew what she thought her motivation was. He whispered, "And what do you believe that purpose to be?" This time, she paused, and Naruto observed her as she picked her words carefully. "My purpose as a ninja," she said slowly, "is to defend my comrades, and help fight with my talents in taijutsu, and with my skill in tracking with my Byakugan. I don't want to stand back and watch as my friends get hurt. I want to support my friends. That is why I want to be a fighter, so that I can prove my worth, and defend my friends from getting hurt in the first place." Apparently impressed by her response, Naruto nodded after completing the wrapping of his shoulder. Hinata made a sling to hang his arm in as she worked. The only sounds in the cave were the snap and crackle of the grasses and wood gathered for the fire that was now burning next to them, and the quiet sounds of Shikamaru and Haruki getting ready for bed. The four people in the vicinity already felt drier and happier as the heat spread its warmth to them. Naruto resumed his speech after Hinata completed the sling. He tested his arm in the sling and remarked, "That's a really good reason for not being a medical ninja, by the way." Feeling content, he got up and walked over to Shikamaru. "You do just fine not being one anyway, thanks, Hinata." The compliment made her flush, and she nodded. "No problem, Naruto." He left, leaving Hinata to pack up her supplies while kneeling on the hard rock floor and reflecting on what Naruto had said. Haruki approached her as she was doing this and continued to gaze at her for a considerable amount of time. Hinata stared back at him until he turned away. She was beginning to get scared of his incessant stares and questioned why he was giving them to her. The thought of it chilled her, but she scolded herself for being so stupid. Shikamaru called them to attention and said, "Okay." He offered them all bowls of food. He observed his team, and their gazes turned to their packs. "Eat up, this is the best I could do under the conditions. Hopefully tomorrow will be better if we can make it to the temple by tomorrow. Haruki says there are food stores there we can have while searching, so until then, make do." He could see why they were curious. "I saw this on the way, and thought it would be best to conserve our food supplies, since the mountains are as treacherous as they are. If we spend another night further up, we'll need that food. It won't go to waste, that's for sure." In agreement with Shikamaru's ideas, they all gathered around the fire to consume the provided plant and berry mixture. The leaves didn't taste very good, and the berries were sour, but the food wasn't bad overall to give them energy. They also had some nuts from their stores. Even though the meal was bland, it was still preferable to nothing. Just being in the warmth was enough for the four of them. They made sleeping arrangements after they were done because his shoulder could heal more with more sleep and because his gentle snoring could be heard over the crack of embers in the dying fire. Naruto had already gone to bed. Hinata could see that Haruki was glancing at her in the last of the light. At last, she had had enough. She called his name, grabbing his attention. Haruki, I would like to know why you keep staring at me. Shikamaru overheard the conversation and sat down next to Hinata, saying, I've also seen you staring at her. Is there any particular reason? Haruki appeared surprised by the assertion. Haruki sat down after his eyes softened from their narrowing. I did not mean to offend you. Your eyes, and your face, they remind me of Akiko. You are remarkably similar. Hinata's gaze expanded. Really? I find that surprising, she responded, considering my eyes are something of a rarity. Even in the Hidden Leaf Village, it's a Kekkei Genkei. A bloodline limit my abilities as a tracker are a direct result of my eyes and their abilities. Haruki gave a nod. Their uniqueness is why I find them fascinating. I wonder if you and Akiko are not somehow related, further back in history. You see, she is from somewhere in the Land of Fire, not far from this very mountain. I come from a small farming village located on the border of the Land of Lightning. I met her a couple of years ago, when I was traveling to find work that allowed me to be adventurous and always busy. She was looking for someone to be her partner in locating a long-lost temple on the dangerous Starless Mountains. Danger was all I needed to hear for me to be aboard for the trip, and plus, I was stricken by her beauty when I first met her. Hinata's mouth fell open in comprehension. Tentatively asked Shikamaru, what is the relationship you have with Akiko? You seemed very concerned for her, more than just co-workers. You seem driven by more than a work obligation. Are you romantically involved? With his arms folded, Haruki looked between the two ninja. We are married. When Hinata and Shikamaru heard this, their eyes widened. I am very worried for her. I know she is a capable woman. She and I are ninja, but the mountains. Naruto sat up and looked around when Shikamaru said, what? With a firm tone he got to his feet and looked down at Haruki with a displeased rage. You mean to tell me that you and Akiko are shinobi? He asked. What are you doing? Lying to us this whole time? I thought you were an archaeologist? As Naruto listened to the conversation, his heavy eyes became more alert, and he muttered, Haruki's a ninja. Too exhausted to be angry, he turned to the man and asked, why didn't you tell us? Haruki gave a shrug. You didn't ask, and besides, he said, forcefully attempting to maintain a low voice, we're not trained. I myself only have skills in taijutsu, and am a capable swordsman. Akiko has fairly skilled chakra control and some knowledge in natural healing and medical ninjutsu, a result of family knowledge. But none of that matters in the Temple of the Cosmos there, we are only archaeologists. As Haruki went on, Hinata mentally repeated the name, Temple of the Cosmos? Akiko was adamant that we study the place despite the risks involved in getting there, because she had heard many rumors about it, including that it was somehow related to an old fairy tale that her mother used to tell her. That place, it is full of history, yet so far has no known origin. Are you familiar with the tale? Hinata inquired. Haruki said, no, I do not. But she had also forgotten the majority of the legend. However, she did make reference to the sun. The sun? Can't it be? Shikamaru interrupted Hinata as she was thinking. All right, so tell me about this Temple of the Cosmos. It is clearly not a typical temple for worship. Haruki stated, it's nothing like that at all. There are corridors that lead to rooms with additional carvings, but nothing else, and the temple's main hall is decorated with pictures. We had just started to thoroughly explore the temple when I was drawing some carvings one day when I heard a clatter coming from one of the more dilapidated hallways. Where Akiko was working. He paused. I need to find her. I followed the noise, and when I got there, she was nowhere to be found. Naruto curled back into his blankets and yawned, saying, we will, but if we're exhausted, we won't do anything. He resumed his soft snoring almost before he struck the pillow, as though to support his assertion. Though not as firmly as before, Shikamaru scowled at Haruki and said, I still don't like that you lied to us. We'll arrive at the temple tomorrow and begin looking for Akiko. You can be confident that we will accomplish our goal and safely bring Akiko back to you. With a strong sense of finality, he turned and went to his own blankets. Hinata began to unfold her blankets as well, and Haruki sighed with exhaustion. Shikamaru likes to know all the facts in a mission, Hinata said to Haruki as she was just getting settled. It increases our chances of success and assists him in making appropriate plans. Even though he is angry right now, he will have forgiven and moved on by tomorrow. Don't be upset with him because of what he did. Huffing, Haruki said, how can I be? He and Naruto are the only reasons I'm still alive. He spared us from this weather, and for that I am grateful. We nearly died even as we climbed up here. I acted hastily because I was worried about Akiko. I ought to apologize. I know exactly how you're feeling, Hinata said, observing Naruto lying on his back with his bandaged arm resting over his stomach and his eyes closed peacefully. You don't have to say sorry. We will make every effort to locate Akiko tomorrow, she added. I promise to search until I find her. When that didn't seem to allay his concerns. I am confident in our skill. I'm not going anywhere. Thank you, Hinata, Haruki said, nodding in gratitude as he took one last, deep look into her eyes and saw Akiko there, which made him smile and remember her good night. She turned to face him and said, "Good night." She put her blanket to her cheek to protect herself from the cold of the night and gazed at Naruto, who was sleeping peacefully next to her and snoring contentedly. She was well aware of the emotions Haruki was experiencing, and the thought of Naruto in danger made her heart hurt. She decided that she would do everything in her power to ensure that Haruki and Akiko were reunited, no matter what, and she closed her eyes in slumber. "What's causing the extreme cold?" Naruto said as he rubbed his hands against his arms, trying to warm himself up. As he spoke, his warm breaths condensed and formed tiny puffs of cloud. A gust blew down the path that he, Hinata, Shikamaru and Haruki were walking along, making the group shiver collectively. Aside from the wind, the only other sound was the crunching of their feet on the frosty path. Naruto gathered his cloak about him to ward off the chill. The storm is over, and the sun is rising. The group flinched as he slipped on a patch of frost, a puddle of rainwater frozen overnight, and hit the ground on his back. Freezing. There's barely a sea cloud in the sky in some places, but it's still. As Hinata paused to check on Naruto, Shikamaru rolled his eyes at him and said, "You fool, don't you realize that the air gets colder as you go higher? I wouldn't be surprised if there was snow where we're going," he said, pausing to glance up. "Really?" Sitting up and massaging his shoulder, which had nearly healed overnight, Naruto said. "What's more," mentioned Haruki, who was leading the way and ahead of the three Konoha ninja, "is that the path gets even more treacherous as we climb higher." "We've been climbing for hours," Naruto moaned at dawn. "We departed by now, it must be past noon." As Haruki resumed walking, he said, "We have about an hour's hard trek left. Watch your step. The path is slick from all that frozen rainwater, and it's a long way down." Naruto straightened himself again and set off with Hinata and Shikamaru at his heels. The trail they had been following was scarcely a path at all, a faint trail worn into the mountainside that angled upwards on a high slope, making their legs burn with the effort. The rock beneath them was uneven, and each crevice formed was filled with a frozen sheet of ice, making every step a slippery trap. The wind had not died out much overnight, and with each gust came a chilling chill that seemed to penetrate anything it touched. There was little conversation because no one wanted to allow the cold air to enter their mouths and cool their already shivering bodies. "We're pretty high up now," Hinata said quietly as she walked a little closer to the edge and looked down over the side of the cliff. Below her was a wide expanse of different shades of gray, the rocks of the mountain they had long since passed through. Off in the distance were different shades of green, the lighter green representing grasslands and the darker green representing the leaves and needles of various trees. It seemed to go on forever, off into the horizon, and she could see large plots of farmland and large lakes that appeared to be motionless. With a glance in the direction she had been looking, Shikamaru said, "I'd say we're about 1,500 meters in the air right now." "Really? Looking up," Naruto remarked, "that's high, isn't it?" Incredulous, Shikamaru shook his head. "Yes, Naruto, that's quite high. Though the mountains stretch upwards for much longer than that," Haruki said. "While no one has climbed to the top of this particular mountain range, it is rumored that some peaks stretch as high as 10,000 meters. "Oh wow," Shikamaru said, "that's enormous. Even a ninja, in my opinion, couldn't ascend that far." "What's the reason behind that?" With a determined smile on his face, Naruto boasted, "I bet I could climb it," saying it would be as simple as snapping my fingers. "You would never succeed. It's too cold to travel that far, and the air is too thin up there. You would either suffocate or freeze, depending on which happened first." With a frown, Naruto looked forward and upward, saying, "You know, it almost looks like we could touch the clouds soon." "We may soon do that," Haruki continued. "As we pass 2,000 meters, we'll pass the lower level clouds." "I think that it might be pretty amazing to live above the clouds," Hinata said with a contemplative smile, laughing, "like living on cotton." "Akiko enjoyed the clouds," Haruki said with a smile. "The view from the temple is breathtaking, so that we can at least escape the cold. Let's head there quickly." They continued to travel in general silence for another hour, and when they finally reached the point where they met the lower-lying clouds, they discovered that they were just plain air. Hinata found it oddly enchanting that she could walk into the puffy, cottony-looking clouds and not feel anything other than a cool, misty sensation on her face. They avoided the clouds when they could, though, because they only succeeded in making the group colder by the end of the hour. They had lost sight of the forests and green fields below them, as well as the mountain routes. "We'll be there in a few more turns in the path, but be careful," Haruki said, turning to face them. "This is a dangerous path this far up. It is worn and poorly maintained." There were more paths branching off to the right and left, traversing the mountainside even further, but Haruki made no move to either direction, instead pointing with his arms outstretched, beholding what was in front of him. "We're here," he said, after the group nodded and slowed their pace slightly to make sure none of them took the quick route down the mountain. Another half-hour went by before the group abruptly hit a plateau. The area around them was foggy and clouded over, and the cold pressed down even harder, chilling them to the bone. "The Temple of the Cosmos welcomes you." "Really?" Naruto ran next to Haruki, and gasped when he saw what was in front of him. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Stretching out along the plateau, and seeming to burrow into the mountain itself, was a large stone sanctuary. Its blocks were gray-blue in color and covered in frost, giving the place a royal, yet colder aura. The temple was symmetrical, with crumbling towers on both ends of the building, and a large black hole on its front. The entrance. Upon seeing it, Naruto narrowed his eyes at Haruki unhappily. "How are we ever going to stay warm in a place like that? For heaven's sake, there isn't even a door. It's totally open to the mountain." Haruki remarked. "Well," as Hinata and Shikamaru joined him, "it's not that much warmer. We usually build a fire just outside, and if we need to sleep and it is too cold, we stay a little further in the temple, where it is a few degrees warmer." Haruki was observing the once splendorous temple. Naruto's mouth fell open. "Just a couple of degrees." "Stop whining," Shikamaru said as he passed him and gave him a light handcuff on the back of his head. "You won't get cold. We can stay up here if Haruki and a girl can." With a pouty lip, Naruto said, "I can stay here, and I'll be fine, but I don't have to like it." Hinata gave him a funny smile as he pouted, which made him scratch the back of his neck sheepishly and follow her and the two men. The group carefully walked on a slippery sheet of icy rock, avoiding slipping and falling. Shikamaru turned to Haruki and said, "This is odd." Haruki turned to him and asked, "Why is the plateau covered, but the path only had a few ice patches?" Haruki quickly responded, "No slope," catching himself as he skidded on the ice. "The snow that doesn't fall here very often freezes and turns into ice. On this mountain, this plateau is most likely the most slick area." "Maybe," Shikamaru concurred, "but it seems strange that there is snow at such a high altitude. Above the clouds, ice pellets should be falling so high. Or, in fact," he continued, "there ought to be absolutely no precipitation. We are not situated near a body of water on the mountainside. A rain shadow ought to be present here." "Those questions are half the reason Akiko and I are here studying," said Haruki, shrugging. "You'd be a fantastic scientist, you know." With a cool shrug, Shikamaru said, "So I've been told. However, the drag would be too great. I wouldn't have time for relaxation or shogi because I would be occupied with thoughts all day. In addition, I'm not so much a theorist as a strategist. I'm not interested in that." "Well, maybe someday." They had arrived at the entrance. Haruki said, "You never know." He motioned for them to proceed, and they did so, entering the dimly lit entrance. Hinata and Naruto shuddered as soon as they passed through the opening. "I think it's colder in here than it is out there," Naruto moaned scornfully. Hinata stammered, her teeth chattering, "It is quite cold. I think we should keep moving." She walked further in, looking out into the spacious foyer. The room was unremarkable, with nothing particularly noteworthy. The blocks that made up the walls and floor were iridescent with frost, and there were paths to her left, right, and directly in front of her that led to somewhere further into the temple. Despite the room's emptiness, it seemed to impose an air of importance and reverence. "Where were you when you heard Akiko, Haruki?" When Hinata yelled, she heard a hollow echo that gave her a chill for an entirely different reason. He was now making his way to the middle of the room after Haruki and Shikamaru had followed Naruto and Hinata inside. "I was just here," he said. "I heard her screams coming from the hallways in that direction while I was studying some enigmatic carvings on the floor." He indicated the path to the left from the doorway. "Sculptures?" Hinata asked, looking down, and Shikamaru did the same. Below their feet were grooves in the stone that were nearly invisible due to the frost. She didn't need to bother, so she let her eyes follow the lines and quickly sketched a shape in her mind. Hinata turned to Shikamaru, who was holding his chin in contemplation, and exclaimed, "It's a sun. I wonder what its purpose is in being here. I'm not even sure if the sun ever makes it to this temple that frequently because of how thick the clouds are or any body in space. The mountain's name must have originated from that." "Ah well," he shrugged. "A sun." Something clicked in her mind. What was happening here had nothing to do with the idea that kept coming to her, but she dismissed it as foolish as immediately as it appeared. "What do we have to wait for? We should start looking for Akiko as soon as possible so we can get some heat going," she said, jumping and turning to face Naruto as his loud voice seemed to be coming from everywhere. "We also want to locate her before she suffers a terrible fate. We need a plan first, or else we'll get as lost as Akiko, or worse," Shikamaru said, giving Naruto a frustrated glance. "Hold on, so sit down, we must begin to think." No thanks, Naruto said, glancing down at the icy ground as he recalled the time he stuck his tongue on a frozen ice pop and didn't want to do it again with any other body part. One believe I will stand. Shikamaru shrugged and lowered himself and Haruki to the ground. Hinata approached the group and stood hesitantly beside Naruto. All right. You are the one who knows this place the best, Haruki. Shikamaru began. This is a familiar area for you and Akiko. Does the temple have any peculiarities that we should be aware of? Where do I start? With a smile devoid of humor, Haruki remarked, this temple is a total mystery. He paused and said, Akiko and I have been exploring this place for almost 6 months, but we still don't know much, and there's still a lot to learn. What we do know is that this temple hasn't been used in maybe hundreds of years, and its purpose is still a mystery. The only hint we have is that sun carving. It is a recurring theme practically everywhere. Shikamaru nodded. What about the temple's design? Is there something odd about that? With a sigh, Haruki looked down and said, I am so sorry. Curious, the three ninja turned to face Haruki. Sorry for what? Shikamaru inquired. We work methodically, but I want to help you. I haven't seen much of the temple's rear. I haven't spent much time in the area where Akiko was last because we've been working to keep it immaculate. I have nothing more to tell you about this location. So, what on earth are we meant to do? You mean to tell me that you've been in this ice cube for 6 months and haven't even seen the place yet? Naruto said, scowling. That's just dumb. Naruto. Shikamaru's tone cut off Naruto's next words, and he closed his eyes and sighed. What a drag. In essence, we're going blind. It is quite possible that Akiko could have left the room where she was working. He sat down, folded his legs, and clasped his hands together. Incredulously, Haruki observed Shikamaru. What is he doing? Oh, that's just what Shikamaru does when he's thinking of a plan, Naruto replied. We'll just have to wait until he snaps out of it. We can't afford to wait forever, Haruki erupted, frowning at the assembly. Hinata said softly, Haruki, we also don't have time to rush things. We can disappear without a trace. Just like Akiko did. We have to exercise caution with everything we know. Shikamaru's plan will ensure that we can find Akiko in a way that will protect us from harm. You have to have faith in us. Haruki averted his gaze and said, but Akiko. Look, Naruto continued, we understand your concern, but you wouldn't need to worry if you knew Shikamaru. You'll see that he's a genius and will devise a fantastic plan. Haruki nodded after taking a deep breath. All right, I'll hold off. Shikamaru's eyes opened after almost 10 minutes of waiting, and he spoke. The others sat close by, and they were shocked to hear his voice in the temple, which was silent except for the wind's whistle in the doorway's cracks. Okay, so here's what I've got so far, he started, and the others shifted to listen. We have a general direction of where Akiko went missing, but little knowledge as to where she could have gone. Additionally, we know that she was by herself when she vanished. The conclusion I've reached is that we cannot search blindly or alone. I know it's a drag, but we'll also have to move slowly and thoroughly. The good news is that with Hinata's eyes, she'll be able to see if there is anything suspicious pretty quickly. That will cut our search time greatly. He glanced at Haruki. Even though you say you know little about this place, it's obvious you know more than anyone else here. You'll have to take us to where Akiko was last. He stood, and the others complied. He told them, be careful and stay with a partner. We need to find Akiko as soon as possible. Never forget that this is your priority. That means that you need to keep yourselves safe and out of trouble. Haruki nodded as Naruto and Hinata simultaneously said, right. Shikamaru turned to Haruki and said, all right then, lead the way. The group made their way to the left-hand hallway from the front entrance. The passage was entirely composed of gray-blue stones, and the hallway was as sparsely furnished as the main room. However, a tiny border of stars of varying sizes, punctuated by the same sun pattern as the one in the hall, ran along the top and bottom of the walls. In some spots, the roof displayed tiny holes where tiny beams of light broke through the darkness of the corridors sufficiently to enable vision without the use of torches and to reveal the floating dust and ice crystals that had accumulated over many years in keeping with the symmetry they saw on the temples outside. Hallways opened to either side of them at regular intervals. They stayed to the left whenever they turned. When the light completely went out above them, Shikamaru lit an oil lamp. He stopped, glanced up, then down. It's not nighttime yet. Are we sloping downwards? Haruki gave a nod. Technically we're traveling further down in the mountain we just climbed. In a spiral pattern. We were just starting to map out the direction of the hallways in relation to the mountain. In reality we're headed straight from where we entered the temple. Hinata remarked, it's like a maze down here. How much of the temple have you and Akiko mapped? Haruki turned left once more and said, very little, I'm afraid. At a dead end, he turned to the left opening and said, this is the first place we've gone, and this is all we've mapped to this point here. From the items in the room, shadows burst forth. This is where Akiko was working. This room, as you can see, is different than the others. Hinata was the first to enter. She looked around the room, noting what was strange. Oh, this room is more furnished than the others. Stars were carved into the blue stone along the walls. There were antique wooden rocking chairs in the far right and left corners because the wood was most likely frozen. It appeared old but sturdy and had not yet completely rotted away. There appeared to be a fireplace in the far right corner that had not been used for perhaps 100 years. Little suns were carved into the columns that led from the mantel. There was nothing but charred, frozen remains in the hearth similar to the upper entrance. The floor featured a lovely carving of a sun. And that must be Akiko's equipment. A large leather bag containing various brushes and powders, hammers, chisels, a sketchbook and pencil, a magnifying glass, and other items was scattered near the fireplace on the right. Haruki gave a nod. Yes, those are Akiko's tools. They were spread like this. When I got here, she would never scatter her things like that. They're too important to her. That is why I was immediately worried for her. An hour after searching for her around this area, I set out for your village for help. Naruto and Shikamaru moved deeper into the room to get a better look. Shikamaru let out a sigh. What a drag. I guess this is where we start. As they awaited Shikamaru's strategy, everyone turned to watch him. They were all prepared to act. Shikamaru looked around the small group to make sure everyone was listening. At last, he said something. Okay, we really can't afford to waste any more time, so we'll work in teams, in shifts. I'll work with Haruki, Naruto with Hinata. What we'll do is, for now, have one group search this room, and another team search the room across from here. In a half hour we'll switch rooms, so that each of us has equal opportunity to search each room, and apply each of our intelligences to decrease our chances of missing something. After an hour, we'll move backwards along the main hallway to the last set of rooms, and follow suit. That's the best plan. I've got. Hinata, Naruto, head out to the next room. We'll search this room first. Meet in the hallway in a half hour. Let's move. Everyone said in unison, right? While Hinata and Naruto went into the next room, Shikamaru and Haruki got together to talk about their own plans for searching the room. As they entered the new room, the darkness returned after they had left the light of Shikamaru's torch. After closing her eyes, Hinata opened them again to activate her Byakugan, which gave her the ability to sense her surroundings sufficiently to light her own torch. The room was as empty as the temple entrance, and the light created shadows on it. Ah, we got the boring room. There's nothing in here, sighed Naruto. We should look closely at the room anyways, just in case, said Hinata. Naruto shrugged and moaned. You're right. I suppose can't hurt. We have half an hour to kill anyways. May as well search this place top to bottom for something to do. But I have a feeling that this room is less important than the other one we were in. You too? Inquired Hinata. Naruto began searching the floor on his hands and knees and said, well, yeah, looking curiously at Hinata. But only because it has chairs and stuff, and it has all of Akiko's things in it. I can't see her leaving it, if it was all so important to her. True, but it's nothing. Hinata trailed off and began searching the corner of the room, using her Byakugan to sweep every inch of the walls and floors and occasionally bending to look more closely at the tiles. Still looking on the ground, Naruto questioned, What were you going to say? When Hinata felt Naruto's eyes on her, she trailed off. No, nothing, Naruto, it's just silly. I would really prefer no not saying. Hinata said nothing, and Naruto sighed. Hinata, come on, just spit it out. You're obviously thinking something. Hinata was quiet and reserved all the time, even during the Chunin exams. He was aware of her intelligence. However, she lacked confidence in her own skills. He believed that she had improved. Well, looking at all the suns and stuff, I was reminded of my mom. Naruto got to his feet and kept a close eye on her. Hinata backed off but kept talking. It was while my mom was with child. My sister Hanabi. I was barely 3. I have few memories of way back then, but this always stayed with me for some reason. It was a fable she always told me because I was so timid, a story of a great woman. Dust began to fall around them as Naruto leaned against a wall and a rumble came from beneath where his elbow struck the blue stone. With a heart-stopping snap, a crack in the wall began at Naruto's elbow and spread upward, causing Hinata and Naruto to glance up just in time to see a sizable crack in the ceiling above them. Naruto yelled, Hinata, watch it, as he seized her small form and threw them both to the ground in a heap, covering as much of her as he could. Hinata squeezed her eyes shut and waited for the noise to stop and the rain to stop falling from the ceiling. It didn't. Moments later, the noise ceased, and Hinata opened her eyes when she felt the dust rain finally stop. With concern in his eyes, Naruto hovered over her. He looked down at her with furrowed brows. Are you okay? In an attempt to ignore the circumstances and concentrate on his query and the possible outcomes, Hinata answered, yes. She felt fine, but she wriggled to make sure nothing was hurt. I'm not injured. Naruto, are you okay? He paused, then gazed at her inquisitively. Yeah, nothing came down, but it could have. We're lucky Then he spoke, his breath catching. Hinata thought his face had suddenly turned red, but she couldn't tell because of the dust and darkness. You know, you smell really good like cinnamon. After giving Hinata a headshake, he helped her up and got off of her. Both of them raised their eyes, although there was a visible crack in the tile above them. It appeared to have temporarily stabilized. Naruto mumbled, "This place is falling apart." Hinata, Naruto, Haruki and Shikamaru rushed in, their faces and postures displaying fear. What happened? Are you okay? After glancing at the two men, Naruto and Hinata swiftly withdrew their hands from holding the others while they were being assisted to their feet. We're fine, Shikamaru, but this place is old as heck, said Naruto. The ceiling nearly came down on us. Shikamaru let out a sigh of relief. Well, no one was hurt, which is great, but I think we need to re-evaluate what we need to do from here on out. Come on. Let's go back to the entrance and come up with a full day plan for tomorrow. We'll make a fire and have a supper as well. With excitement at the thought of heat, Naruto exclaimed, "A fire? Let's go." After making their way through the tunnels, they returned to the main entrance and proceeded to set up a makeshift camp. They placed a small fire in the entrance's corner, far enough away from the wind to avoid damaging the architecture. They started planning for the following day as soon as they were all comfortable in front of the fire. Shikamaru started, "Well, so today didn't go as well as I'd hoped. The infrastructure of the building, the further it goes down, seems the least stable. The search in the furnished room also yielded nothing yet. Tomorrow we have to start there again and we'll work hour by hour on each room, the same way as we were today." Haruki appeared distressed, but Naruto and Hinata nodded in agreement. Shikamaru went on, but Haruki silenced him with a fist to a pan. "You know, it is possible she got lost in a further tunnel. She may have gotten disoriented and strayed from the path, gotten lost, or something else." The group was startled by the clang that followed. His voice was frustrated as he exclaimed, "That might not give us enough time." He stopped, panting and gritting his teeth, and said, "We should look as long as it takes, and stop with this pointless planning. My wife is missing, and each minute we waste is a minute less. She may have." For a moment, Hinata began, "Oh, Haruki," but Haruki interrupted. "No, I'm sorry, Hinata, I shouldn't act like that. We're trying our best, and we can't do more than that, but," he breathed in deeply and shakily, "I'm just starting to believe that this may be an impossible task. If we don't work harder, I would like to search all night." Shikamaru stated, "That would be detrimental to the mission. We need rest or we'll be at more risk of getting lost, or not being able to correctly use our senses and instincts, which we need. It's easy for the darkness and tight quarters of those places to twist your senses, so we have to be on high alert. We need rest to be of use, so I think we should turn in now and get a very early start, and search all tomorrow." Shikamaru went to retrieve his belongings while still speaking. "Pack a lunch in your bags, and bring it with you, and plenty of water. You can also bring anything else, like ribbon or cloth, to help you keep on what you've searched." Together, Hinata and Naruto said, "All right." They set up their sleeping bags in the foyer, on the edge of the wall closest to the tunnels, and ate a supper of dried meats, bread, and cheese that had been packed from the Hidden Leaf village. At night, the air on the mountain plateau was colder, but the air in the corridors was now warmer due to an unidentified source of heat. When a breeze blew up and warm air touched their skin, the relative warmth felt good. Naruto didn't care either way and quickly found a place in his sleeping bag closest to the hallway, right across from the entrance. Shikamaru explained it away by saying that the air in the corridors was isolated and underground, and kept warmer that way. Hinata slept next to Haruki, while Shikamaru and Haruki slept on either side of him. Everyone was asleep shortly after darkness had engulfed the sky and the last remnants of evening red had disappeared from the cloud lining. Hinata found himself waking a few hours before dawn. She thought the cold floor was making her restless, so she rolled onto her side. However, as she became more conscious, she heard an odd sound. She turned to her right and saw the trembling shadow in front of her in the dim light of the moonlight shafts that escaped the cloud cover, narrowing her eyes. She recognized the shape as Haruki. She stared for a long time, unable to figure out why Haruki was trembling so much, but she attributed it to shivering from the cold. "Oh, Akiko." She finally realized that Haruki was crying when she let out a loud sniff and felt a pain in her chest. Shedding tears over the loss of his beloved wife, Haruki was so engrossed in the moment that he didn't even notice that other people were around. She felt bad for Haruki and bad for not finding Akiko sooner. The crying stopped after a few minutes. Haruki had sobbed himself to sleep. Hinata pondered what she could do to assist while still lying down in the dark. "We already have the plan," she thought to herself. "I guess it wouldn't hurt if I started a few minutes early. I'll be all right with my Byakugan. I might be back with Akiko before they even know I left." Unaware that someone else in the crowd had noticed a commotion and was also getting up, Hinata quietly got out of his sleeping bag, packed her belongings, and made her way back into the left side hallways. The route that Haruki had shown them earlier that day was the one that Hinata took in order to avoid arousing the ninja's razor-sharp senses. She initially followed it stealthily and slowly she hurried to the room she and Naruto had not had time to inspect earlier after reassuring herself that she would not be heard. She lit a candle as she entered, finally allowing her eyes to relax as the flame flickered with every tiny puff of air that passed it. The shadows melted from every object in the room in a liquid fashion, whether it was because she was aware that she was defying orders or maybe because she had seen Haruki's suffering. Her heart was racing. She was aware that she would find the clue that would lead her to Akiko in this particular furnished room, based on her intuition. Okay, she muttered to herself after calling forth her Byakugan. She silently and methodically scanned the room, beginning with the rocking chair in the far left corner. The wood was cold and smooth under her fingertips, and despite its obvious age, there wasn't a single splinter out of place as she carefully examined it, brushing every surface to make sure she wouldn't miss anything. She focused on the fireplace after being reassured that there was nothing wrong with the chairs. She felt each groove that time had carved into the cool stone of the mantel as she ran her hands over it. The sun motif continued all the way to the top of the mantel. The fact that there were so many indications of the sun in such a chilly and overcast location struck her as rather ironic. Nevertheless, she was bothered by their presence. She was aware that the sun was crucial to solving the temple's riddle. However, that was not her goal. A sound reverberated through the hallways outside the room as Hinata was ready to bend over and look inside the fireplace. She instantly extinguished her light and stood motionless in the shadows. What was that? I asked myself. Hinata, she recognized the sound as coming from a shoe scuffing on the floor when she heard it again. It can't be them. They shouldn't be awake yet. It hasn't been that long. I'm sure that they're still sleeping, or just getting up. No one would have come after me unless they heard me, and I was careful to be quiet if it's even them at all. She got up and positioned herself defensively, prepared to defend herself should something dangerous approach in an attempt to attract the attention of whoever was approaching and, if it was hostile, to frighten it away. She called out into the darkness, "Hello." But she soon discovered who it was. She heard the footsteps accelerate in the direction of her voice. "Hinata? Where are you?" she asked. She grinned. That voice was familiar to her. Naruto was the one he had pursued her, or at least shared her thought. She was shocked that he had discovered her in the dark. For whatever reason, there was no light on him. Hinata called his name and held out her arm until his body touched her hand. Naruto followed her voice when he felt her hand press against his stomach. He said, "There you are." Hinata lit her candle again, bringing light to his mildly agitated face. Hinata was instantly uncomfortable. Naruto's eyebrows knitted as he launched into his tirade. "Hinata, what were you thinking? Why'd you go off on your own? What if something had happened like it did earlier today?" "I'm so sorry, Naruto." But Hinata averted her gaze, ashamed of her actions in response to his criticism. "Well, I was woken up by Haruki, and..." Naruto continued to gaze sorrowfully at her while forcing Hinata to hurry, "and he was crying. And he cried himself to sleep and he was so sad, and I was too cold to really sleep well, so I thought." Naruto's expression softened, and he raised his hand to silence her. "I get it, it's okay. You're safe. I'm here now if something goes wrong." Hinata gave him a look. "So you're not going to make me go back?" "Nope, I woke up to go, and saw you weren't there. I figured you had gone looking again, so I came down here to help, but still..." Naruto looked at her with a serious expression. "Don't do that again, please. Go off on your own. I mean, I don't want anything bad to happen to you." Despite blushing, Hinata nodded. "I won't, I'm sorry." Naruto grinned. "Good, so, where do we stand? Have you found anything?" Hinata moved to where she was beginning to gaze at the hearth. "No. Not yet. I've only looked at the rocking chairs so far. I was just about to take a closer look at the fireplace." Naruto said, "Okay," and knelt beside Hinata together. They ran their fingertips over every nook and cranny of the huge fireplace, feeling along every surface in search of a clue. After doing this in silence for a few minutes, Naruto paused and turned to face Hinata. "Hinata." She gave him a questioning glance. "You never finished your story earlier about the story your mom used to tell you." "Oh, yes." Naruto remembered, which surprised and somewhat flattered Hinata. As she collected her thoughts, she turned back to her searching. Naruto observed her every action with interest. "Well, the story my mother told it to me before bed if my day had been bad." "Bad how?" The question bothered Hinata a little. "If I was ever made to feel bad about my capabilities or about myself in general, my mother told me this story to make me feel better." It was so long ago. The story was about a woman who was so gentle and pure of heart that no one disliked her. She appeared to a group of people, I can't remember what their names were, who were being destroyed by strange wielders of dark magic. Naruto was so engaged with the narrative that Hinata's tired sigh made him leap. Hinata put her hand on the front of the fireplace to steady her as she rocked back on her heels, saying, "I'm sorry, Naruto, that the story is so broken. It was so long ago since I was told it that I can only remember bits and pieces." Placing a hand on the fireplace and bending his body to gaze at her, Naruto imitated her posture. "That sounds like it was a great story. I guess your mom wanted you to grow up to be like the woman in the story. I sorta wish I had a mom to tell me stories like that." Hinata briefly had a horrified expression. "Oh, Naruto, I'm sorry." "Nah, it's okay. Neither of us can help that, you know. From what you've told me about that lady, you do sound a lot like her." Hinata averted her gaze. "I wish I was a half of what that woman was like. I don't have her bravery or beauty or strength. I am nothing like her." Hinata looked up into Naruto's face as he firmly said, "You're wrong. You were very brave, and though you may not have the physical strength of many, you make up for it in your own strengths. You're smart and quick, and you have your Byakugan, and you're so kind." Here was a grin. "I don't forget all the times you've helped me out, and talked me out of bad times. You just talk yourself down too much." Naruto breathed deeply. "And about beauty?" With her eyes widening, Hinata exclaimed, "Wait, what's that?" Naruto noticed it as well. Suddenly, light emerged beneath the palms that were resting on either side of the fireplace. Their shocked faces were fiercely illuminated by the glow, and as the light increased, they had to squint. "Naruto, take your hand off of the fireplace immediately. Something's happening." Hinata leapt away from the fireplace at the same moment as Naruto. "What is going on?" Two glowing sun carvings had appeared where their hands had been until the fireplace exploded in flames and the light from the two carvings faded again. The light grew stronger and stronger until they could hardly see. The silence was broken only by the crackling of flame for a few stunned moments. It was Naruto who spoke first. "What the hell was that?" Hinata was focused, her brows furrowed. "I don't know, but I think maybe we should go back and tell Shikamaru." Suddenly there was a grinding squeak on the floor beneath them, and the big sun carving they were standing on split in two, revealing a huge dark hole. Hinata screamed and began to collapse in an attempt to catch Hinata and drive a kunai knife into the edge of the moving floor. Naruto slipped one down his sleeve. However, as his hand reached for her arm, the additional weight caused the ground to give way, and both Naruto and Hinata fell screaming into the hole beneath them. They came to a sharp incline of cold, smooth stone in less than a second with nothing to do but wait until they stopped. They slid deeper and deeper into the darkness at full speed. It felt like forever before they could safely slow down and come to a stop. "Naruto!" Hinata yelled, coughing from the dust they had stirred up, and in a panic just behind where she had landed, in the darkness, she could see his chakra. After activating her Byakugan, she approached him and gave him a hand up. His response was, "I'm alright, just a little shaken up. You?" According to Hinata, "I'm fine physically." Hinata became increasingly agitated as she said, "But I'm not sure if we're alright now. We're lost and we have no way back, and I dragged you into this. I disobeyed orders and it could cost us not only this mission, but our lives. This is entirely my fault." Hinata sighed shakily, frustrated and disappointed. Naruto asked, "Hinata, please?" in an attempt to stop her pessimistic thoughts. "It's no good to think about that. I came after you of my own will, and stayed with you. All that's done. We need to look forward. Think about it. This is almost guaranteed what happened to Akiko. We could be right on the trail of finding her." Hinata let out a gasp. "You're right, Naruto. That makes perfect sense. We'll just have to trust that Shikamaru and Haruki can figure out what happened. They'll know that the room was the last place we were. My candle is still up there though. That means we have no light with us now. Where do we go from here?" With his bag in front of him, Naruto knelt down. "I guess we'll have to wander around here and try and find a way out." Hinata gave it more thought. "I guess we could treat this area like a maze, of sorts." "Yeah? What do you mean?" "Well," said Hinata, "in a maze, one trick people use is to use a clue or any rope or thread to mark the path. They've chosen the more trying method, but one guaranteed to work, is to move along with your hand placed on the wall, so that you'll follow each wall until, eventually, come to the end." Naruto grinned. Hinata blushed as Naruto felt around for the things he had brought with him and felt his hand wrap around what he was looking for. "That sounds awesome, Hinata. I told you that you were smart. There we go. Here. Hold still for a second. This will help me keep together with you easier, and keep us from getting separated." Then he brought a rope and tied its end around her waist, though he was hunched over her, his face closer to hers than he had imagined. Hinata spoke softly as he did so. "Thank you, Naruto. We'll find our way, and we'll find Akiko as well." Naruto grinned. "You bet now," he replied, completing the knot on her end of the rope as well as his own. "Let's set off. You lead, since you know how to do that maze thing better and you have your Byakugan. You just let me know if you want to rest, or if you sense anything unusual. Okay. And remind me to mark our path." just in case Shikamaru and Haruki actually manage to find this place. Okay Naruto, said Hinata, I'm ready. We'll mark an X at intervals in the path with our kunai, that way, if they bring lights, they can see the symbols we made. Naruto said, great, see? We've got this. I guess we can leave, then. Before moving forward, Naruto waited until he felt the rope tugging at his waist. For a while, they continued walking in a straight line, occasionally turning to the left. The path slanted steadily downward, and the air grew warmer and fresher as they traveled farther. There was no way to know, but it appeared as though there was only one path to follow, with no side routes branching off from the main one. After walking for so long, their legs grew tired from the continuous incline. Naruto would occasionally inquire about Hinata's well-being and whether her Byakugan could detect any indications of chakra, but thus far, there was no indication of anything other than more gloom in the future. Though he knew that wishing for something they didn't have would not help him, Naruto wished they had lights so they could see their surroundings. The loss of his sense of sight started to irritate him. He would simply have to follow Hinata's lead and hope for an escape soon. In front of him, Naruto heard Hinata utter, I miss light, I miss being able to see color around me, and brightness and texture. I just want to see light once more. Don't worry, Hinata, Naruto reassured her, we've been walking for so long, I'm sure we'll find something soon. Do you hear that? He and Hinata both stopped. It was possible to hear the sound of a swift stream rushing in the distance. I bet that the water is coming from just ahead. If we can find the water, we can follow it. I'm sure it has to lead outside. Hinata said, her voice full of hope, you're right, of course, I hear the water too. It must come from somewhere outside. Naruto, I'm impressed. At her compliment, Naruto smiled, feeling proud and intelligent. Coolly, he extended his arms over his head. Well, I don't mean to brag, but... From beneath them came a deafening rumbling. Drowning out his words, they choked as the earth shook, sending dust and dirt clouds into the air that lodged in their throats. Naruto braced himself in the tunnel and yelled, what the hell is this? According to Hinata, I don't know. She felt it when another, more powerful tremor of movement knocked her to her knees. There appeared to be a seam in the ground beneath her knees. She quickly reached for it and ran her fingertips along it. The realization made her gasp. Naruto. Be careful, the floor is breaking up. What? He cried in confusion. Naruto, I think the water is coming from below us. It has caused the tunnel we're in now to become weak, and our extra weight is causing it to crumble. We have to get out of here now. Before he could finish, the ground beneath his feet gave way, and he felt himself falling through the air for the second time that day. Hurry Hinata, get, he said. The entire tunnel floor collapsed around him, and rocks fell everywhere. He briefly experienced a painful tug around his waist. He had been prevented from falling by Hinata's weight. He jerked his body to a stop, grunting as he felt the rope pull tight as it reached its limit. After that, he felt himself fall once more, and Hinata joined him in his descent after he heard her scream in a mix of shock, pain, and fear. After a few seconds of falling, he felt the icy shock of the water envelop him and propel him ahead. He choked as water filled his lungs. When he broke it, he gasped for air after frantically pushing his body towards the surface in an attempt to keep his head above the swift-moving torrents. He thrashed his arms and legs, but the rope and attached weight continued to pull his body downward. Although he was aware that Hinata had fallen, he was unsure of her whereabouts or whether she was okay. Keeping his own head above water was enough of a challenge for him. It was imperative that he escape the current. He needed to make sure Hinata was all right and devise a plan. He swam to one side with all of his strength, hoping to find something to hold onto. He struck a rock wall that had been largely worn smooth by the water's continuous flow. He fumbled frantically for a handhold on the wall. He clung desperately to a protruding rock as his fingers encircled it, holding on. He felt the rope around his waist twist halfway around before pulling violently on his stomach. Carrying Hinata along with the current, it tugged at him and he grunted, but he didn't move even though the rock hurt his hands. He managed to hold on. Naruto exclaimed, Hinata. Fearing she had passed out, Hinata, answer me, are you okay? He heard her gasp in response, breaking the water's surface as well. She coughed weakly and said, Naruto, I'm right here. She stopped, and Naruto realized she had collapsed once more. She was a prisoner of the current, tethered to the rope, and continually dragged beneath. Naruto shouted, Hinata, pull yourself to me by the rope. He hoped she heard him. He was at a loss for what to do, but she would drown if she couldn't escape the water. Before they knew what to do, they would both drown if he let them go now. Trapped in their own predicament of being bound together, they had to think of something. When Naruto sensed a pull on the rope, he realized Hinata was drawing herself toward him, short as the rope was. He soon heard her splashing at his side with greater clarity. She called, Naruto, I see you. She was gasping for air as she struggled to drag herself to him using the rope. Now what do I do? I can't stay in the water much longer, I'm starting to lose my strength, the water is too strong and cold. Yeah, I know. He also became aware of his legs feeling numb, his body was out of the water above that and was not as cold. He was aware that Hinata was fully submerged and that if she got too cold, her body would not react, it would be impossible for her to stay afloat. He had to get her out of the water while he came up with a strategy. Over the sound of the rushing water, Naruto yelled, "Hinata, climb on my back." Hinata looked surprised and asked, "What? Are you sure?" "Naruto, I can't. The rock may not be able to support our combined weight, and you need your strength. I can't do it, I can't risk both of us." Naruto didn't wait for additional justifications, he reached down and took Hinata's arm, pulling her out of the water while making sure he could maintain his grip on the rock with one hand. Her wet clothes made her body appear much heavier, and he growled with the effort as she emerged from the water. She gasped and instinctively put her arms around his neck. Naruto felt the additional strain. Even though she was careful to cause him the least amount of discomfort, he took care to hide it so Hinata would have no justification for plunging back into the water. Naruto chuckled, "There, that's not so bad, is it?" He felt warmer with her on his back. Despite the fact that they were soaked with freezing water, having her near him also made him feel more comfortable. He knew she wouldn't have survived much longer in the water because he could feel her shiver and her body swaying as she struggled to breathe. "Now, what is our plan? Can you see anything?" He waited for her to look at the path ahead of them as she paused and said, "Let me try." Less than a minute passed. "I can see. There's light at the end of the tunnel. It's almost a straight path. The water is treacherous, though there are rocks poking out of the rapids everywhere. If we're not careful, we'll be beaten to death, and we can't use chakra to stand on the water. The surface is too wild, it would be like a conveyor belt, too uneven to stand on, and there is only a small space above the water we would have to bend, and we would surely lose our balance if we fell. We'd be sucked under the water." "Okay then," Naruto said with a sigh of effort. "Hinata, since you can see, you'll have to lead. Can you swim through this?" She nodded against his shoulder, and he felt it. "Yes, I can. Don't worry Naruto, I promise I won't let you down. I will lead you safely through." "Oh," he said. "What is it?" The plan they came up with appealed to him. Hinata declared, "It won't work." "Huh? Why not? What's wrong with the plan?" Naruto mentally reviewed the plan and found nothing wrong with it, but he would swallow his pride and listen to Hinata if it meant their lives. "The rope, it's not long, but long enough for you not to be able to follow where I'm going. You may end up on my other side, and if we got tangled we would be in trouble, and if you go first, I won't be able to tell you where to go before you end up crashing into a rock." Hinata made an excellent point. She was correct, and Naruto could see it. "I refuse to believe that we can't make this work," he responded. He focused and closed his eyes. The struggle to keep the two of them out of the water was burning his arms. The tiny rocks in the chilly water buffeted his legs, causing them to sting. "Hinata, we need to think of something quickly, because I can't stay here much longer. My arms feel like they're falling off." Hinata thought aloud. Naruto, can you swim with me on your back? Would that be too hard?" Naruto remarked, "I think I can manage that for a short while." "Why?" "If you can swim with me on your back, I can direct you and help keep you away from any rocks you come too close to. I can kick out and keep you safe while you swim this way. We'll both know where to go, and we'll be keeping each other safe." In relief, Naruto released a harsh breath. He dropped them both waist deep into the water again and said, "Hinata, I think that may work." They could feel the cold seeping into their bodies and the pull of the water on their legs. They experienced shivers. "Hinata, are you ready to go?" she responded, taking a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." Naruto let his fingers drop from the rock, bracing himself for what lay ahead. He and Hinata were immediately dragged by the undertow beneath the water's surface. Naruto struck out and broke the surface once more, using all of his strength, though he couldn't fail. He hadn't expected Hinata to be so much extra weight. Not right now. Hinata tensed the arms around his neck. Abruptly he heard her yell, "Naruto, swim to the left," and kicked out in that direction. He knew he had gone past the perilous rock. When he felt her calm down, he heard her call again shortly after, "Naruto, swim to the right now." Naruto began swimming toward that direction. He heard Hinata murmur, "We're not going to make it," and then heard her huff in desperation. He knew that she had pushed them off of an approaching rock because he made a slight change in direction. With breathless encouragement, he said, "Good job Hinata." Even though he was getting tired, he pushed himself for a few minutes. They swam, occasionally passing over tiny waterfalls that submerged them and left them speechless as his strength failed him. Naruto began to worry, but he persisted because he was determined not to let Hinata down. Hinata exclaimed, "Naruto, we're almost there." She slipped into the water after letting go of his neck. "I see the end of the tunnel." Naruto was so exhausted that he could barely feel her weight off his back. In a daze, he gazed ahead and watched as light rapidly appeared in front of him. He closed his eyes to protect himself from the blinding effect. As though on a waterslide, the two ninja leapt from the tunnels and landed in more water. When they did, they were both able to swim above the water again. Hinata was the first to break the surface after assessing her surroundings and realizing that her Byakugan was no longer required. She allowed her power to fade and her eyes to return to normal. She was more worried about her partner than she was about the outside world. With joy, she called, "Naruto, we made it." Her joy was short-lived, though, as Naruto broke the surface feebly. With the chakra in her feet keeping her out of the still water, she raised herself onto the water's surface and said, "Hey, are you okay?" She rushed to Naruto when she noticed that he was not acting in the same way. With increased concern, she repeated, "Naruto?" As she reached down, took hold of his leaden arm, and pulled him out of the water. "Please answer me, are you okay?" she asked. When he finally answered, she sensed a change in his weight as he steadied himself and sent chakra to his feet. "I'm fine, Hinata, but I think I'm hallucinating." Hinata scowled. "What do you mean?" With a puzzled expression, Naruto gestured toward the coast. When Hinata looked at what he was pointing at, she gasped in surprise. Oh, Hinata was astounded by what she saw. Her Byakugan's sharp eyesight could not have prepared her for the confusing sights she and Naruto were now witnessing. Naruto said, "This can't be real. We were on a snow-covered mountain, and it was freezing. How can a place like this even exist here?" Standing on a pristine lake with the mountain behind them, they could see a vast forest of enormous, leafy trees all around them at the periphery of their field of vision. After being in the cold blue temple of the cosmos, the contrast between the greens and browns of the grass and jungle was nearly blinding. Above them, the sky was a serene azure, with fluffy clouds of goodwill dangling from its edges. At a great distance, the snow-capped peaks of mountains were visible. They could see the distant cloud traces hanging close by like flags. The warm breeze and temperatures were already causing their icy water-soaked clothes and hair to start drying. There was only a little strip of grass between it and the lakeside, and the trees stretched out before them in every direction. To their right, they could see a well-worn path that led into the trees. Hinata questioned, "How can this be?" What she saw startled her. "This is..." Naruto concluded, "Amazing." For her, he was still shivering and panting heavily from the effort of keeping the two of them above water, as Hinata noticed when she turned to face him. He looked at her. As he turned his head, he smiled comfortingly. He closed his eyes, gathered his remaining strength, and stood up straight, saying, "Well, I guess there's nothing we can do now but explore." After he had taken a few steps, Hinata began to follow him. Hinata began to grow increasingly suspicious of this unfamiliar location as they left the thunderous sound of the waterfall they had just swum through. As they strolled, she questioned, "Naruto, how can a place like this even exist? We were just in the middle of a freezing mountain, searching a musty temple and its hallways. I'm sure we have not traveled far enough down to be in a climate like this." For a while, Naruto kept silent while he tried to think of a response. He eventually shrugged, "I really can't answer you. We can't go back through the tunnels, so I guess all we can do is go ahead and explore. And besides," he continued, "I need to rest. My limbs feel like they're ready to fall off." She responded, "Oh, yes, you're right. You had to hold me out of the water for all that time and then swim all the way through that cold water with me on your back." She breathed deeply. "I'm sorry you needed to put yourself in that kind of danger for me. If you hadn't come up with that plan, we would still be in that water, and we probably wouldn't have made it out. Don't apologize." He smiled broadly at her. "How about we have something to eat first?" he said, gazed at her wearily. "If you want to make it up to me though," he added. Hinata gave a shy smile. "Yes, that sounds good. What are we supposed to do now?" Two of the four of them were missing when Shikamaru woke up that morning, which was the last thing he had anticipated seeing. Haruki and he conducted a thorough search and came to the conclusion that Hinata and Naruto had gone into the hallways alone to look for Akiko. When the two surviving ninja realized this, they returned to the room they had previously been in and discovered that their friends had only left a candle. Shikamaru tried to think of a plan as soon as it occurred to him, but Haruki was happy to pacing the room nervously, savage and worried, muttering all the while. Shikamaru opened one eye languidly and followed Haruki's steady circle on the floor. He shut his eye once more. "Haruki, calm down and stay still. We need to think of a plan." Shikamaru reflected. "Yeah, that's easier said than done. I don't know what Naruto and Hinata were thinking. Going off alone like that, this just wrecks any precautions that we could have made. Now our organization is ruined, and our objectives changed, but perhaps there can be some good come from this." When Shikamaru finally said, "I guess we have to try and find out what happened here. It's our only option at this point." Haruki turned to face Shikamaru, his face sour, but all he could say was, "Go on, why is that?" Shikamaru let out a sigh of relief that Haruki would exercise patience. With Hinata and Naruto gone missing in the same place as Akiko, we can assume with a high probability that Naruto and Hinata suffered the same fate as Akiko, which also means that we still only have one objective, not two, and in a way, this could be brought to our advantage, since we now have a fresh trail to follow. Haruki scowled. So what you're saying is? Shikamaru nodded, and Haruki realized what he was implying. He watched Haruki's face droop and closed his eyes, saying, it means that we must try and find Naruto and Hinata's trail. Hope they were on Akiko's trail. And go from there. Shikamaru let out a sigh. I'm sorry, it's still all so uncertain, but this is all we can do now. I hope you understand. I do, but I hope you can understand, Haruki said while raising his backpack on his rear, that if we cannot find Akiko in time, I will blame your teammates, and I will never forgive them. This is how I feel. I wish them no harm, even if we do not find Akiko in time, and you may also choose to leave this place. If you lose hope, I will never stop searching until she is found. However, he continued in a cold voice, I will not let you go unpunished. If you are the reason Akiko is not alive anymore, do not make me do that. Shikamaru stood up to confront Haruki. He couldn't hold Haruki accountable for his remarks. I understand, but also realize I'm on your side. Let's get going then. Since we're in such a bad predicament, I think it'd be our best bet to take our torches. Haruki nodded. Shikamaru was burdened by the pressures of leadership as they began their second thorough search of the room. He was still upset about his comrades' disobedience and disappearance, but he worried a great deal about them as he strolled. Shikamaru begged no one but himself, please make sure that Haruki doesn't have a reason to make good on his word. Although the little snack of fruit and soaked rice did not fully satisfy them, it was sufficient for their circumstances and worked in order to relieve the remaining pain and stiffness in his shoulders. Naruto stood up and flexed them after the water had infiltrated their packs and soaked their possessions. He turned to see Hinata attempting to assess what was left of them as she sorted what was spoiled and what was still good to keep. He saw her delicate features turn into a frown. As she began packing her bag once more, Naruto approached her. What do you think? Could we keep enough? Hinata took a moment to respond. I think so. A lot of food was ruined by the water, especially our salted preserves, but we could keep our fruits and nuts. And this place has many plants that are able to be eaten. This place, it still astounds me. She exhaled. I wish Shikamaru were here to try and explain this. Naruto scowled. I don't. Shikamaru is going to flip when he finds us gone. Inwardly, Hinata concurred. She was still deeply embarrassed by her actions, and she felt even more guilty now that she was putting her life and Naruto's in danger. She followed the mountainside with her gaze, looking up toward the spot where they had blasted out of the waterfall. Still, what do we do now? She asked. The mountain's curve was incredibly ragged and crumbling, going inward, then out, and back in again. Climbing was impossible. We cannot leave here by climbing. Well, if we can't climb, all that's left to do is explore. If we don't find more food somewhere here, then we'll starve before we get out of here. So, you think we should explore? Hinata looked uncomfortable at the idea, and Naruto could tell by her expression. But there's so much mystery around this place, we don't know what to expect. Naruto smiled mischievously at her. Hinata was still not persuaded, so Naruto knelt down to confront her. So why not catch anything out there by surprise, and find out for ourselves what's out there? He asked. Come on Hinata, trust me, we're not doing anything useful by just sitting here, so we may as well see what's here. Hinata let out a resigned sigh. Hinata accepted Naruto's hand as she stood, and he used the other to carefully take her knapsack and lift it onto his own back. It's not about trusting you, Naruto. It's not trusting what's out there, but you are right. The act caused Hinata to flush. Naruto never failed to notice, but he simply grinned. Alright, let's choose a direction, and start. Hinata quickly clamped her palm over his mouth and said, Shush. She then leapt into the closest tree and hid among the leaves without wasting any time. Naruto quickly followed her. Once he was beside her, he looked to her for a sign of what she was doing. She observed intently before turning to face Naruto, who was standing beside her. He saw that she had activated her Byakugan. Looks like you were right. We did catch someone before they caught us. After waiting for a few more seconds because Naruto appeared perplexed, Hinata gestured for him to follow her. They moved through the treetops in stealth, eventually settling in a tall, leafy tree. She gestured to the grass on the ground, which had been trampled into a path that wound into the forest. Patches of light danced on the ground as a warm breeze blew through the leaves. Then on the four travelers who appeared out of nowhere, they were dressed in light, loose clothing that appeared to be both comfortable and long-lasting after a long day of work and exposure to the sun. Their skin had turned ruddy as it carried logs on its robust back. A man steered a large, attractive black workhorse by the reins. Axes and other woodcutting implements were carried by the other men. Naruto whispered to Hinata, a group of lumberjacks? Where do you suppose they came from? Hinata gave a shrug. I don't know, she said in a low voice. She confessed to herself that she was almost excited, and her eyes gleamed with interest. but what do you think we should do now? Notwithstanding his hesitancy, Naruto said, as much as I want to just jump down there, let's just watch for now. Both turned back to the travelers after Hinata nodded. They appeared to be very unhappy with themselves. Even though they were moving slowly up the street, the four men appeared to be on edge, and their axes were not simply slung over their shoulders. Rather, they were carried like weapons. The horse's owner appeared to be having issues as well. The animal was snorting unhappy noises and shaking its head all the time. Neither of the two individuals observing the scene from above was unaware of these facts. Naruto whispered to Hinata, "These woods seem peaceful enough. I wonder why these guys seem so uptight." Hinata proposed, "You think we should go down there and ask for help? I think it would be better than following them, and besides, maybe they could help us. I would rather make friends than enemies in a strange land like this." Agreed. Naruto ducked past Hinata and waited for her to follow him into a lower branch. Both of them moved to the path ahead of the travelers. In this manner, the men saw them as they hit the ground and jumped in alarm. They were raised in retaliation, prepared for battle, by the three axe-wielding men. The man in front asked loudly, "Who are you?" No ninja could tell if it was fear or rage. "Who sent you?" "Whoa, wait a minute," Naruto said, taking a protective stance in front of Hinata and raising his hands to make it seem as though they were harmless. "We were up in the mountains and we fell in a river that dropped us into a lake back by the mountainside. We're ninja looking for a woman who got lost up there." The man screamed, "You lie," and stepped forward angrily. "You're with them, aren't you? Huh? Answer me, you won't change us?" "Wait, Hammond?" Naruto and Hinata were threatened by a man who turned to face the man who had spoken to him and led the horse. "Jarek, we cannot hesitate with their kind or we'll suffer the same fate as the others. We must protect these two and ourselves." "No, they are not interlopers. Look at Jess." Hammond and the other two men halted and faced the horse, whose deep brown eyes were observing Naruto and Hinata with composure. She appeared totally relaxed. Hammond paused. He then turned to face Hinata, where Naruto was still positioned defensively. "The horse is calm, I see," he said at last. He let go of the axe he was holding. "I am sorry, strangers, but as of late, our land has fallen on very hard times, and no one is safe. I was only trying to protect myself and my comrades. Please, forgive me." Naruto calmed down and smiled comfortingly at the men. "No worries, I'm just glad we resolved that issue. My name is Naruto, and this is Hinata." Hinata stepped up to stand beside Naruto and said, "I'm sorry we startled you." The four men went pale and gasped when they saw Hinata. Naruto scowled, but Hinata appeared taken aback and self-conscious by their response. "Hey, what's up? What's wrong with you?" "That girl." Hammond stumbled, staring at Hinata with wide eyes. "Who are you?" The men's intense stares caused Hinata to shrink back, and Naruto saw this and instinctively moved in front of her again. "Hey, give that up. Can't you see you're making us uncomfortable?" Shaking himself out of his daze, Jarek and Jess moved forward. "Forgive me, Naruto, was it? But the young lady behind you surprised us because her eyes." Naruto tightened his jaw suddenly. A chill went down his spine and the hair on the back of his arms and neck stood on end. "Her eyes are very powerful, and they are a trait passed down in her family." "No, you have me all wrong. They are not something to be afraid of, they are spoken of." As Jess shook her big head and began to struggle against her reins, Jarek was interrupted in the middle of his sentence by a whinny. Her struggling turned into uncontrollable jerking movements, and her eyes had changed from being calm to wide with fear around them. The wind grew chilly, and the warm, rich sunlight vanished behind coal black, low clouds. Everyone fell silent, and for a brief instant, the only sounds were the wind howling and Jess's terrified whinnies. Then, like a snapping rope that set everything in motion, a spine-tingling shriek broke the moment. Hammond yelled, "Jarek!" while the other two men outran him as they ran down the path. "It's here. We must flee before it gets too close." Amidst the chaos, Naruto exclaimed, "What the hell is going on here?" Hinata winced at the sound of another shriek, and she leaned in closer to Naruto. Although her Byakugan was activated and her face was focused, her eyes conveyed her fear. She began to look around. "Jarek!" Hammond shouted to his friend once more. "Did you hear me? We have to leave?" Hammond stopped when he saw Jarek's piercing eyes. "I will not leave the woman who could save our people." Jarek's words caused both Hinata and Naruto to pause. Perplexed and taken aback, they observed as Jarek and Hammond gazed at one another, their long-standing friendship resulting in an unspoken dialogue between them. At last, Hammond tossed down his axe and nodded his head. He ran as fast as Jarek. Jarek abruptly turned and sliced the ropes holding the logs to Jess's back with a sharp dagger he took from a sheath at his hip. When Jarek threw her reins into the air, Jess pulled at them one last time, Finally free of all the excess weight, Hammond leapt onto Jess's bare back with a swiftness and agility that neither Hinata nor Naruto had anticipated, and he gave her a strong shove toward the path, away from the three people who were still there and away from the shrieking noise. Hammond glanced behind him. Jarek, I'll get the others and we'll return. Keep yourself alive until then, Jarek positioned himself in front of Naruto and Hinata, his dagger held protectively in front of him. After Hammond and Jess had vanished into the trees, however, Naruto had had enough and turned to face Jarek by grabbing his shoulder. What the hell is going on here? What's causing the loud noises, and why is everyone so freaked out? What were you guys talking about, interlopers? What does that word even mean? Jarek pulled away from Naruto with a shrug. Naruto gritted his teeth and nodded, saying, I don't have time to answer your questions. You said you were ninja? Well, I will need your help. We must protect this girl. Naruto shouted, don't act like you know her, and if this thing she needs protecting from is such a danger, we're going to need her help. Naruto. Hinata backed into him and choked out at the contact. Naruto turned to face her. There was fear on her face. She indicated a spot in the trees close to the trail the travelers had taken and asked, what is that coming through the trees? Squinting into the darkness, Naruto was unable to see anything this time. The group clapped their hands over their ears because the shriek was so close. Hinata, I can't see it. What is it? So much evil. Hinata was unable to understand what her Byakugan was letting her see, but it was strong, and whatever energy it contained had the enduring iciness and gloom of something genuinely evil. She nearly felt lightheaded. Naruto reached out and grabbed her shoulders, asking, Hinata? Are you okay? What is it? Can you tell us anything about it? Jarek said calmly, but his voice trembled, it's here. We must protect the savior, even if it means to the death. Naruto gave Jarek another bewildered, irate glance, but his focus was soon distracted when everything around him became motionless, as though the storm had subsided. The wind stopped blowing, and the ominous clouds that hung over them ceased to swirl. All people could think about was the enormous shadow beast that emerged from the trees. It was a massive silhouette that looked like a big predatory animal, standing at almost 10 feet tall and 15 feet long. The creature was so dark that it appeared as though the world's background had been torn away, leaving only a pitch-black void in its place. The creature's blood-red eyes, claws, and teeth were the only parts that weren't black. As it came out of the trees, it looked at the three people in front of it and froze, just staring. Unsure of what to do, Naruto just stared at the beast. What the hell is that? Jarek effortlessly drew another of his thick daggers and said, we call them Siomi. It means, nightborn. They're made of complete darkness, and only certain weapons, like this one, can kill it. Naruto was nearly blinded by the white metal of the blades, which seemed to gleam in the sunlight. But with my daggers alone, I have little chance of destroying it. What's that? You mean you stayed here knowing you probably couldn't kill it? What did you do that for? We could not all outrun it if it found us here. It has our scents, and we could not lead it back to the city. We can only stall it long enough to make sure that it does not hurt the princess, until Hammond can bring reinforcements. While staying motionless to avoid the monster's attack, Naruto asked, how long will that take? Probably long enough for the monster to have its way with you and I. Naruto gave him a worried glance with troubled blue eyes. So you're saying we'll probably die protecting Hinata? Gentle fist. Naruto didn't have time to reach out before the tiny blur of white and lilac flew past him, so he asked, wah? No, yelled Jarek in her wake, do not attack it yourself. Still, Hinata dashed in the direction of the enormous shadow beast. The beast gave a ground-shaking screech at her movement and prepared to attack with lightning speed. Hinata gritted her teeth and gathered her strength, channeling as much chakra as she could manage into her hands so that she could attack the beast where she believed it to be weak. She disregarded the advice even though she could hear the men behind her calling her name in warning. She had to do this. She had to give it a shot. The Siomi's eye briefly shifted in Hinata's direction before appearing to retract abruptly. Hinata skidded to a stop as it appeared to vanish into thin air, but the Siomi did not elude her notice. She turned on her toe and hurried back to where Naruto and Jarek were desperately looking for the Siomi. After stopping, Naruto, look out! Hinata pleaded, above you. When both men looked up, they saw the Siomi descending upon them. A second later, both of them leapt from the spot where the beast had landed, recovered swiftly, and were back on their feet in a flash, prepared to attack or defend. Naruto would have remarked on Jarek's strength and litheness if he hadn't been so preoccupied with the Siomi. You shall die today, you beast! Jarek swung his daggers at the Siomi, but the animal was too fast for him, and Jarek was flung through the trees with a swift flip of its thick forearm. There was a splash a few seconds later. Just as the Siomi turned to face them, Hinata finally caught up to Naruto. It began to move slowly in their direction after making its high-pitched cry once more. As they both retreated from the creature, Naruto said, "Hinata, what do we do? I don't even know how to approach this creature." Hinata started to say, well, but was cut off when a big arm landed on top of them together. They sprang to the left. Being careful not to get struck, Hinata went on. "My Byakugan is sensing that this creature is drawing a lot of power from a central source. I see it, but once they were temporarily safe." "But what?" she was asked by Naruto. "What do you see?" "Well, I don't sense that it's chakra coming from the beast." "What?" "With its thick tail, which Naruto and Hinata just managed to clear with a high jump into a nearby tree. The Siomi spun around like a bull at the low-lying branches it struck with its tail snapped as easily as toothpicks, and they watched in horror. With a look on his face that Hinata had never seen so clearly before, Naruto gave her a serious look fear. "Hinata, so what you're saying is that this thing isn't even alive?" Another leap into the air saved the two from danger as the Siomi lunged for them in the tree, trying to stay as far away from the creature as they could. They flew into another tree. "No, I'm not sure. I don't know what I am looking at. Oh, I wish Jarek had told us more before the Siomi got him. I hope that he is okay." Naruto stiffened, prepared to act at any time. "We can't worry about him now. We have our hands full." "Hinata, what do you see?" he said. "Is there some weak spot we should try attacking?" Jarek said only he could kill it with those daggers of his, but we have to try at least with what we have. After examining the throbbing energy emanating from a central source located deep within the beast's chest, she began, "I believe we should attempt a physical, long-range attack first, to see if we can attack it like that." As he leapt from the tree, they were both in and soared over the Siomi. Naruto exclaimed, "Right?" He launched a flurry of ninja stars and kunai knives with paper bombs fastened to them in the direction of the Siomi. When he was just above the creature, the smoke and dust from the explosions quickly obscured the Siomi from view. It let out a cry of agony, and Naruto grinned triumphantly as he landed. "Ha, I think that did it." Hinata remained motionless, maintaining a steady gaze on the smoke cloud before her as if nothing unusual had occurred. What Hinata could only refer to as the beast's dark chakra was flowing through it. She exclaimed in surprise, "What? I was sure that would have at least some effect." As the Siomi slammed full speed into the tree where Naruto was, Hinata could only yell his name as a black shadow flew from the smoke in his direction. It cracked so violently that Naruto lost his balance and fell awkwardly from the tree. Hinata observed as Naruto skillfully hopped from tree to tree, rolling to safety on the ground. After catching hold of a branch to regain control, Hinata let out a sigh of relief. "Naruto, are you okay?" Naruto sighed with relief as well. "Yeah, I think so. That was close." However, he spoke too quickly because the Siomi returned in an instant, and Naruto was unable to respond in time. The Siomi lunged at Naruto like a tiger on a hunt, and as he attempted to dodge it, its heavy paw struck his legs, sending him to the ground in a cloud of dust. The impact knocked the wind out of his lungs, and Hinata heard him gasp. Hinata began running in his direction and yelled, "Naruto!" After him, she watched the scene in front of her as if she were running in slow motion. Naruto, however, was not going to give up so easily. Naruto was able to evade the Siomi's bright red claws as they tore through his body by slipping from beneath the large, dark paw with wide eyes. Naruto and Hinata watched as the Siomi struggled to free its claws after they had been driven almost 2 feet into the ground. Naruto shuddered. He muttered, "I am so glad that those claws aren't in me right now. I don't know where to go from here if that attack didn't work." "No physical attack. Will you have an idea what to try?" he said, turning to Hinata as he wiped the perspiration from his brow. I've been trying to watch the energy that's flowing through the creature," Hinata said, whispering, "and I think we need to focus our attention on its chest." Naruto watched as the creature's paw became slightly looser in the dirt and asked, "Why?" He spun around, took her hand, and fled to the safety of the forest before Hinata could finish her response. Hinata went on when they were far enough away to still be able to see the creature, but it was concealed by a dense forest of trees. All of its strength seems to be emanating from this central source, in its chest. "I think, if we can hit it with an equal type of force, like our own chakra, we may be able to neutralize it." "So, who's going to attack? Your gentle fist could get directly to the source." "I tried already, but for some reason it seemed almost afraid to get near me. Once I started focusing my chakra, it makes me think that chakra-based attacks are its weakness. Whoever attacks, we need to be careful it doesn't evade our attack." She gave a nod. "You're right, my gentle fist style can more effectively attack." "No chance." Looking up from their planning, Hinata and Naruto saw Jarek emerge from the direction in which he had been launched. He used that arm to support his left side, but his left eye was black and blood still dripped from the wound he concealed. Because of his condition, he was unable to use his daggers, which hung in their sheaths. He appeared to be in rather poor health. Hinata exclaimed, "Jarek," when she saw him, "Are you okay?" "I am fine. but you attacking that monster is simply out of the question. Just as Naruto opened his mouth to speak, Hinata spoke first. Her eyes blazed with anger and indignation, and a long-forgotten pain suddenly returned. "And who are you to tell me what I can and cannot do?" she asked. "I will not stand back and be protected when I can be right up there fighting. If we're going to come out of this alive, you need me. And another thing." All of their focus was drawn to the beast by the Siomi's scream and the pounding of the ground as it ran in their direction. Jarek tried to step aside, but his hasty motion caused him to recoil in agony and drop to his knees, forgetting her anger. Hinata ran to him, supported him, and jumped laboriously into the closest tree. Naruto leapt toward the Siomi in the opposite direction. 6 clones materialized in a cloud of smoke as Naruto made the hand signals. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. While in the air, while the other clone assisted in shaping the spinning ball of chakra that was forming in the real Naruto's palm, 5 chased after the Siomi in an attempt to divert it as the Rasengan was being completed. He called out, "Hinata, where should I hit this thing?" As she and Jarek knelt, Hinata gazed at the creature with her Byakugan. After ensuring Jarek was safe, Hinata rushed after Naruto, saying, "Hit it directly in the center of its chest, Naruto. The source of its energy is there." Jarek yelled at her to stop, but she wasn't going to abandon Naruto to deal with this enormous, unidentified monster by himself. She felt certain that she had the superior ability to attack in this situation, and she wished she had been Naruto. She watched the outcome of his attack as she followed him. Following her instructions, Naruto completed his Rasengan and sprang full speed toward the creature. He could feel the chill coming from it as he got closer, like he was plunging into a bowl of ice, but there was nothing he could do about it now. In his hand, he could feel the Rasengan pulsing and flowing as the Rasengan ate through the Siomi like a drill. He knew he would make contact with it and feel his hand squeezing deeper into its body until he reached the point Hinata had described to him, at which point the nightmare would end. Naruto prepared himself for impact as he was just a moment away from striking the Siomi. However, there was no impact. Hinata observed how the moment it appeared that Naruto would make contact with the Siomi, it appeared to transform into a vaporous, dark cloud that Naruto passed entirely through. Hinata saw as the energy that had spread to the Siomi's body's edges was simultaneously retracted to the exact spot she had mentioned to Naruto. She observed the dark chakra assuming a human shape from his chakra network. She could tell that Naruto was confused by the abrupt change in his situation. He fell to the ground with a sickening thud, hidden in the murkiness. "Oh no," Hinata muttered as she came to a halt, not understanding what was going on but knowing she needed to see Naruto. "Naruto, answer me please. Are you okay?" Though he was slow and dazed from his awkward, uncoordinated fall, Naruto made a small movement. He placed his hand to his head and slowly raised himself into a half-sitting position. The Siomi's remnant, a dark cloud, hung nearby but now appeared innocuous. Hinata could only see one dark, scattered sphere of energy instead of even a human-shaped energy source. Taking a chance, Hinata rushed to check on Naruto. Upon arriving at him, she noticed a big bump and bruise protruding from his head, slightly above the temple. He appeared to be only partially conscious, and his eyes were half closed. After catching sight of her, he croaked, "Hinata," asking, "What happened? Where did the thing go?" She touched his head lightly but withdrew when he winced, saying, "Oh Naruto, it disappeared before you hit it. It changed into a different form, and you went right through it. Please stay calm. I think you might have a concussion. You need to stay down." "But the creature, Naruto, you need to be treated." "No Hinata. The creature. Watch out." As Hinata spun around, she saw the dark cloud begin to churn and revert to its previous form. It went by so fast the Siomi bounded toward the 2 ninja after forming in the air, front first. Hinata would have said that it appeared even more dangerous than before. If that were possible, its teeth were gleaming with a liquid red, as though they were composed of blood. Except for its 2 front fangs, the fangs gleamed and had a deep purplish-black color similar to potassium iodine. They had grown in size. It was visible to her. The Siomi's energy was now focused on going directly to its mouth. When she saw its mouth open for her, her heart leapt to her throat. "Hinata, move!" As Naruto leapt to his feet and shoved her out of the way of the oncoming monster. She felt his dead weight strike her back as the Siomi leapt past them both. She noticed the black tooth graze along Naruto's leg. She heard the sound of them hitting the ground and Naruto's cries of agony. Naruto gripped his leg and examined the damage, gritting his teeth against the pain. "NNGH." He said his leg's calf was slashed long and thin, although the cut didn't appear to be very serious. Hinata could tell by Naruto's expression that it hurt. Crawling to his side, Hinata scurried up and asked, "Naruto, are you okay?" Naruto nodded, his jaw still clenched. Choking out, Naruto said, "Hinata, get out of here." His teeth shattered and he was shaking now. "I don't know if we can kill this thing. I can't move anymore. My leg feels too messed up. Go and save yourself." The corners of her eyes began to water. Naruto, I can't just leave you here. The way Naruto uttered the single word, please, made her meet his gaze directly. His proud blue ones were hurt and worried about her. He clenched his fingers at the floor. Do this for me, don't let me keep you from going on and completing this mission. She bowed her head and let the tears fall from her eyes. Watching her, Naruto said, don't be ridiculous. Her eyes were the fiercest he had ever seen them. When her head rose, she turned away from Naruto and confronted the Siomi, which had just recovered from its lunge and was now facing her. I will not leave you at the hands of this beast, and you will complete this mission with me. And Shikamaru, I will not fail in this. As she prepared her stance, Hinata thought to herself, for Naruto. She concentrated on her Byakugan and her trembling body, erasing the hopelessness that was trying desperately to take over her thoughts. I have to do this, I must protect him at all costs. Now, her enemy was all she could see in the world. When the Siomi saw her, they immediately charged at her with all of their might. After tasting Naruto's blood, the creature became enraged due to the lust it had sparked. It let out a loud, shrieking cry and charged at Hinata and Naruto. Hinata scowled intently as she waited for the ideal opportunity to attack. She wasn't the Siomi's target. If her assumption was right, the beast attempted to jump over to attack Naruto after she waited until it was almost upon her. Just what she had expected, she let out a cry of exertion and aimed a strong, soft fist upward into the beast's abdomen. As her hand pierced the outer darkness, it felt as though it was submerged in ice. Then Hinata felt her hand touch something genuinely solid. The Siomi appeared to draw into itself as abruptly as it had previously formed from the dark cloud. Hinata could see the energy leave the form instantly. The chill left the air a moment later, and the howls of the wind outside their sphere subsided to the simple, warm breezes that had been there before. The Siomi was permanently disabled by whatever she had struck inside of it. She let herself breathe again as her heart slowed. That is, until she heard Naruto scream. Naruto? She asked, turning to face him but pausing when she saw him. Even though he was already in poor health, in a matter of seconds, his condition had gotten worse. As she rushed to his side, she asked, Naruto? In a more frantic tone, she took a quick, careful look at him. His eyes, now closed, rolled wildly under their lids, and his face was pale with pain. His breathing was labored, and he writhed in agony. Hinata was aware that these weren't signs of a concussion. Naruto, what's wrong? Jarek hobbled over with a pale face and said, it is the Siomi curse. He observed Hinata with an odd expression of wonder and respect, but his face was also sad. The Siomi curse? Inquired Hinata. Even though Naruto was already unaware of his surroundings, her gaze never left him. In an attempt to calm him and keep him motionless, she gently ran her fingers through his hair. Those creatures, the ones we call the Siomi, have a very potent toxin. It is a poison that manipulates a person's life energy into something sinister. It travels quickly, and causes extreme pain to one who is infected, and soon, when the whole body is taken over by the toxin, the person is changed. Jarek indicated the location of Hinata's Siomi destruction. Hinata let out a gasp. The remains of a human girl, not much older than she was, were on the ground. Her face was twisted in a long-gone pain, and she lay face up on the ground with her eyes closed. She had long, black hair that seemed to have been shiny and lovely once. Her entire body and face conveyed a sense of beauty, and the wound Hinata had given her went through her chest, where her heart used to beat freely. The realization caused Hinata's eyes to well up with tears, which then poured down her cheeks. She looked at the boy in front of her, thrashing and moaning in excruciating pain, and sobbed, Naruto. Jarek, she begged, is there nothing I can do for him? Do you know a cure? Jarek sadly shook his head. I'm sorry, princess, there is nothing I can do to save his life. Only Asha knows the cure, and even she hasn't been able to cure someone who has been poisoned. Hinata said, Princess? But her gaze remained fixed on Naruto. The idea of not being able to assist Naruto took over her thoughts, and her voice sounded hollow. Jarek did not immediately respond, so Hinata went on, it is not me that we must protect. Naruto needs us now. More tears trickled down her pale face and landed on Naruto's cheek, blending with the dust and perspiration that adhered to his skin. Why do you call me that? I have been called that in my village for my family status, but you should not know about that, and you have been incessantly trying to protect me. Why? Hinata asked. Desperate to help, Jarek said. Hinata, unable to watch the heartbreaking scene in front of him. You have amazing powers, not unlike our mystic. Asha, your eyes, I am sure that they have power, yes? I have seen them in action? Hinata gave a nod. Hinata abruptly realized what she had been staring at in the Siomi all this time. Yes, my eyes are a bloodline trait. I have inherited it from a long line of my family who also possess these eyes. They can see the chakra network of a living creature's body, they said, and the realization nearly made her sick to her stomach. She activated her Byakugan and immediately realized why Naruto was in such pain and why she had previously been unable to determine whether the Siomi was alive or not, so that's what they mean by life energy. Naruto, now I know what's going on. An inky black crept up Naruto's leg from the bite mark, slowly seeping into the vivid, lovely blue of his chakra. The chakra itself was attacked by whatever was in the Siomi toxin, which appeared to transform it into something evil. Hinata muttered, his very soul is being attacked. If he dreamed at all, she could only imagine what he was seeing. Trapped in half-consciousness as his soul literally was being eaten away, she glanced at his leg once more. Occasionally, flashes of flaming red chakra, which she believed to be the demon fox's chakra, licked at the sludge's creeping blackness, reversing its advancement. Not enough to save him, though. Jarek, I think I can stop the progress of the poison. Is there some way to neutralize it in isolated patches? I can do that, girl. When Hinata turned around, she saw Hammond, still on Jess' back, and 5 other warriors approaching. A formidable-looking woman with a very dark complexion and deep brown eyes that were full of compassion and intelligence stood at the head of the group. She wore her graying hair down her back in a long braid. Despite her large frame, she appeared to be in good physical condition for her age and capable of caring for herself. She wore a long, plain brown dress with a rainbow-colored belt that contained numerous pouches. She had an exotic appearance that suggested long days in the sun, just like the other people in the group. Asha, said Jarek, glad to finally see backup. This girl destroyed the Siomi. Around Asha, the 3 warriors, 2 women and 1 mana, began to whisper, and one of the women stood up and burst out laughing. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a long ponytail. She wore leather armor and a long rapier at her hip. She had the appearance of a fierce, arrogant woman. Really, Jarek? I don't believe for a second that this little girl could defeat a Siomi. When Hinata turned to face the group and they saw her eyes, she was unable to speak. With the exception of Hammond, Hinata observed the group of warriors begin to murmur once more. Hinata had a lot of questions about everyone's odd behavior, but she wasn't concentrating on it at the moment. Asha, she begged, turning to face the woman ahead despite the chaos around her. Asha turned her head and focused entirely on Hinata. Hinata bit her lip to maintain her composure. Please. You have to help me save my friend. He was bitten by the Siomi. Jarek says you are the only one who can do it. I can help you however I can, but please, she muttered, I can't do it alone. Asha remained silent. She left the warriors behind and moved forward, taking Jess by the reins. Hammond dismounted and accompanied Asha to stand beside Jarek. Asha dropped to her knees beside Naruto and started touching his arms, chest, and neck. She occasionally furrowed her brows in focus. Her hands hovered over his stomach as she unzipped his orange and black jacket. There, she paused, silent for a moment. Then, this boy, he has strange powers as well, no? Yes. Hinata didn't want to ask how Asha knew and didn't want to spend time explaining at the moment. It didn't matter to her. Asha. The poison is still in his leg. Is it possible to save him? Asha gave Hinata a questioning glance. She paused and turned back to face the boy who was still grimacing in his sleep from the agony he had experienced. You can see the poison in his body? She asked. She talked slowly. I can heal him, girl, but only if you can do as you say you can. Hinata gave her a hopeful glance. You need me to stop the poison from spreading? Asha gave a nod. She paused and shot Hinata a stern but sympathetic glance. If not, I will be unable to work fast enough to save his life as it is, she said. I may not be able to save his leg. Hinata felt as though everything had stopped around her. Naruto losing his leg wasn't even on her mind. If Naruto lost his leg, his life as a ninja would pretty much be over. Would Naruto want that? No, Hinata continued. Naruto has too much love for life, too much left to do to let this get him down. If anyone could overcome that obstacle, it would be him. Hinata's Byakugan came to life. She was able to pinpoint the location of the poison on the leg as well as its path through the chakra network. Gentle fist. She closed the chakra points by hitting them precisely before the poison did. She hoped that closing the points would be sufficient to save him, and she watched as the chakra stopped flowing past them. Asha gazed at Hinata without emotion, but there was a gleam in her eyes. Then her attention shifted to the women and men who had accompanied her. We need to get this boy back to my hut as soon as possible. Hammond, Fyra, support the boy between you on the horse and rush him back to my quarters. Call Avila and tell her to gather the ingredients and boil some water. Miela, Amintas and Fyun, help Jarek back to the healers. I shall join you soon. Everyone leapt to obey her orders. The red-headed girl who had questioned Hinata's strength approached her and, after giving Hinata an apologetic look, carefully took Naruto by the shoulders and, with Hammond's assistance, lifted him onto Jess's back. In front of them, Hammond mounted and cautiously spurred the horse in the direction they had come. Jarek waved the other 3 away after they fussed over him. When one of the men insisted on accompanying him, they took off faster than was likely healthy for Jarek's body. After hesitating, a man and a woman returned to the spot where Asha and Hinata were. According to the woman, Jarek refused to let us help. Her honey blonde hair was styled in 2 braids, and her face was round. Like the man, she wore a leather headband, a leather vest, and leather knee, shin, and elbow pads. They both wore the same all-white outfit, including a sleeveless shirt underneath their protective armor, with the exception that she was wearing a light, loose skirt and the man beside her was wearing loose pants. Actually, all of the fighters except for Hammond wore those clothes similar to the red-headed woman. Miela carried a thin sword at her hip, and Fionn carried daggers, just like Jarek. We insisted that Ammonites go with him. Fionn and I will escort you back, Mistress Asha. Asha gave a nod. Mila and Fionn, a tall, lanky man with a tangle of thick black hair on his head, looked at Hinata with timid curiosity. Thank you. Mila, I am glad. I think that someone aside from me shall get to know the woman standing next to me. Hinata suddenly felt suffocated by all the questions she had and everything that had happened in such a short time. The Valley of the Cosmos may have just been blessed by the return of the Sun Princess. For the 3rd time since waking up, Shikamaru and Haruki started down the hallway as night was falling. Fearing that any food scraps would tamper with a clue they might discover in the room, they had moved their midday and evening meals back to the main hall. Haruki had spent the entire day in a tense, unpleasant mood, but Shikamaru had remained hopeful that, since Naruto and Hinata had vanished, they would be able to find a new lead and use it to determine what had happened to Akiko as well as to them. By the time they retired for their midday meal, the sentiments had begun to wane and were almost completely gone. Shikamaru, however, could not imagine giving up so easily, particularly on his fellow shinobi. Gathering his courage, he made a self-promise to succeed this time. Shikamaru. The addressee turned to face his friend. Yeah, Haruki? What's up? Haruki scowled and said, You're a genius, so tell me, what are the chances of us finding Akiko alive? Shikamaru scowled as well. Without knowing all of the circumstances, I can't tell. No, Haruki interrupted, I don't mean that way. I mean, considering all the data you are aware of, including how long Akiko has been missing and the fact that she not only vanished without a trace but also left her brush and all of her belongings behind as though they had been dropped. Shikamaru pondered. Haruki. Her chances would be slim under any normal situation. Very thin. However, as he watched Haruki's expression dim, he continued, I believe in Hinata and Naruto since the 3 of them are probably in the same location. I firmly believe that there is still a good chance that we will locate her. You simply must have faith in us. Though not totally persuaded, Haruki nodded and said, You know, I just feel so helpless. What kind of a man am I? Haruki ran his hands through his red-brown hair. I mean, I am supposed to protect my wife from the dangers in her life, and I don't even have the ability to do that. Shikamaru stopped walking and waited for Haruki to stop as well, then turned to face him. Listen, Haruki, I can't change how you feel about yourself. A man who is going through amazing lengths to find his wife, all I can say is that it's a bad idea to focus on past mistakes when there are things that need to be done right now. The best thing we can do is have faith that we can find something and then work hard to make it happen. After hesitating, Haruki grinned resolutely and said, Yes, Shikamaru, once again, you are correct this time, we'll find something. Shikamaru nodded encouragingly to Haruki, and both continued their walk. However, only a few steps more down, Haruki cursed. Damn it, in the room, I believe I left my lantern on. Shikamaru tried to reassure the visibly agitated man, saying, Haruki, it's not a huge deal. We have plenty of lantern oil, considering Naruto and Hinata left theirs here. Furthermore, you're not sure if you left it on. Haruki, however, shook his head angrily this time, saying, I am a failure. If I can't even remember to extinguish a lantern, what good am I? We cannot afford to waste our resources because, in addition to the fact that we will be too exhausted to start looking again right away after the 2-day journey, Akiko will have even less opportunity than before, not to mention your friends. You see, their path was dimly lit in front of them as they rounded the final corner. Light is coming from the room. Yes, I kept the lantern on. How much oil did I waste, I wonder? Shikamaru, however, had other ideas. Haruki, notice the light. It appears to be. Will your lantern's light be white? What? Yeah, Shikamaru said, accelerating toward the room, and Haruki followed suit until they reached the doorway. Shikamaru had to cover his eyes as the room was filled with bright white light. What is that, Haruki? When he could see enough, Shikamaru moved forward and walked towards the fireplace, which was the source of the light. When he felt his hand touch the mantle, he lightly drew his fingers along the top until he felt them hit the lantern, which was almost hot to the touch after being left on for so long. Shikamaru lifted the lantern and watched in wonder, excitement, and curiosity as the bright white light gradually dimmed until he was able to trace it to the sun's tracing on the fireplace. Shikamaru turned to Haruki, who was watching from the hallway, stunned, and grinned wryly. This place is more of a mystery than I initially thought, he said, without much conviction. Haruki shook his head and moved deeper into the room, kneeling to examine the floor more closely near the spot where they had discovered the candle. Shikamaru was playing with the now mostly dimmed sun, which was still glowing faintly, and he put his hand on it, watching as the light intensified. Hey, Haruki, it looks like I have this worked out. It appears to operate by activating a mechanism behind the stone with heat. He crossed to the opposite side and verified his suspicions, saying, there's another one over here. Or the stone itself is a very powerful heat conductor. Shikamaru. There is a chip in the floor here that, not that I think about it, wasn't there before, Haruki said excitedly. Shikamaru approached and examined the chip in the sun carving, saying softly to himself, I wonder, as he took a kunai knife from the pack on his leg and inserted it into the chip. It fit flawlessly. Haruki, perhaps you should be more wasteful and useless more often, Shikamaru said with a smile. You recently learned the whereabouts of our missing individuals. Although the final light of the day had disappeared, leaving only moonbeams and starlight to see by, Hinata felt as if she had been up for days. Her eyes drooped, and she felt so sick she felt like she would prefer not to feel at all. She wished she could sleep, but she willed herself not to. She looked up at Naruto's sleeping form and smiled sadly. He had been sleeping calmly for almost 2 hours. Asha had done wonders. She had never seen such wisdom, confidence and compassion in a woman since the Hokage herself. When they had arrived to her small hut, sitting on the outside of large stone walls, which led to more questions, Naruto was already there, placed on a small table being tended on by a child of around 10 years of age. The child was Avila, whom Hinata had learned in the course of the day was an orphan girl that Asha had adopted as her own, to teach and to lead as the next mystic of the village. Asha told Hinata afterwards that she had sensed great passion and talent in the child in just the short time she had been at work. Avila had stripped Naruto of his sweat-soaked jacket, shirt and pants, as well as had everything ready for Asha's return, including a meal cooking over a fire. She closed her eyes and pressed her forehead against the smooth warmth of the back of Naruto's hand, allowing the heat to sink into her skin and spread throughout her body. Asha had assured her that all of their efforts had been successful, and she sighed, her head still spinning from everything she had learned and experienced today. She recalled the tense hour when Asha had treated Naruto's ailment and ultimately saved his life. When they arrived, Avila had everything ready for Asha, and Hinata felt powerless as she watched Asha treat the toxin that threatened Naruto. Asha worked quickly to make the salve that she claimed would draw the toxin together, and when she was ready, she lifted the light cotton sheet covering Naruto's body and exposed the leg with the isolated toxin. Hinata's stomach turned when she saw the same blackness that made up the Siomi ooze from the chakra points that the poison chakra had access to. With a sick feeling in her stomach, Hinata started, Asha, asking if that was the fate of all Siomi bite victims. When one's life energy is warped by such a poison, it causes extreme pain, Asha said, nodding, her eyes telling the entire story of the sadness she had witnessed. Despite her expression remaining emotionless, she paused and said, you see this toxin? Girl, it's like there's a war going on inside your body between your life and an invading half-life. Are you aware of this toxin's nature? From what I can tell, this toxin acts as an infectious agent, but it doesn't attack the physical body, but the energy created by the mix of physical and spiritual energy. Your life energy, or chakra, Hinata said, trembling as she watched Asha scoop up the salve she had made and apply it to the affected area. Naruto moaned in pain and began to thrash, but Avila arrived and held him down without saying anything. She continued, like it's eating your soul. As it infects that part of your chakra, it turns that part of your chakra into whatever the poison is, and it spreads slowly until it takes over all of the chakra. The salve is working its way into the chakra network, creating a pathway for the next step of purification. A particularly loud gasp from Naruto diverted her attention, and Hinata moved to help Avila keep Naruto still. Whatever the ointment was doing, it hurt. Don't you worry, girl, she said, looking at Hinata's frown. Asha nodded. Since the deformed chakra hasn't left the leg, it hasn't entered any organs that form chakras, he will survive. Hinata opened her mouth to say, but his leg, but Asha raised her hand. Now, girl, there's no point in worrying about that. We've just got to see what happens. Asha was silent then. For a few minutes Naruto continued to struggle against Hinata and Avila, and he could not contain the growls of pain that escaped with each. Hinata felt a lump form in her throat. Then Asha walked over to a cupboard and picked up a small crystal. It was the size and shape of a kunai knife, and it was clear and colorless. She walked back to Hinata and looked at her. You should do this part. Hinata said, I'll do whatever it takes. She released Naruto's arm and moved to where Asha had held out the crystal. When Hinata picked it up, she felt an electrifying resonance with the smooth surfaces. What must I do? The salve should have pulled the poison to a central spot, Asha added. Use your eyes, girl. Asha scowled and Hinata turned pale. You have your eyes, sweetie, Asha said. Now you have to drive the crystal in there and keep it there until the poison is gone. By using that, you can increase your accuracy and get all of the poison. I would have to make a guess, and he might have to lose the leg completely if I fail. Drive the life crystal too far, or leave it in the leg for too long. Your body can take care of the rest after you've completed that. The memory made Hinata bite her lip, and when she pressed the sharp edge into Naruto's leg, he let out a horrible scream. Asha had moved to his torso to assist Avila in holding his arms, and Hinata had straddled his legs to keep them motionless while she held the blade in the same spot. The crystal's resonance to her own chakra grew stronger, but it grew cold in her hands, and she watched in awe as the blackness that had once flowed in Naruto's leg was drawn into the crystal like ink. She had hit it spot on, and in less than 5 minutes the last trace of black was gone from his leg, and vibrant blue chakra started to replace it once more. Hinata looked to Asha for direction and said, "It's done. Take out the crystal and put it on the table," the woman said, nodding. What you did to stop the spread of the poison can be undone. Hinata reopened the chakra point and observed Asha as she went about her work. I will now treat and dress the physical wounds this boy has. She then went to work, leaving the only sounds in the hut being the crackling of fire and Naruto's loud breathing. 3 hours had passed since Asha had finished tending to his head and leg injuries, and with the assistance of the other 2 women in the room, she had moved him to a clean bed, and Hinata had sat with him ever since. She had watched with relief as the color returned to his cheeks, the slickness of sweat that had covered his face disappeared, and his shaky breathing stabilized, and he appeared to be sleeping as soundly as any other night. Avila had brought her some stew during her vigil, which Hinata barely ate, and she almost resented it because it was so delicious. Hinata heard footsteps coming from behind, but she was too lightheaded from sleep deprivation to turn her head to see who it was. She wanted to resist giving in until she saw him awaken, so she caught herself as her head fell forward in her sleep. Remember what you told me about the curse of Siomi? Hinata nodded her assent to Asha's question. Asha walked to Hinata's side, her arms folded across her large chest. There's more to it than that. She held out the life crystal for Hinata to see without her Byakugan. The crystal looked only slightly cloudy, like a glass of dirty water. This, Asha said, is not just an infectious agent, it is a unique form of artificial life force. Man-made? Scowled Hinata. Yes, child, Asha said, nodding. It is a horrible concoction made by a malevolent individual. It enables people to, once it enters the major organs that produce life energy. Umbrage is his name. That poison was made by him, then. Additionally, he could build his own army by infecting one person and releasing them. That's awful. It makes sense why Hammond was so upset with us. He believed that this Umbrage was with us. There's more to it than that, Asha said, shaking her head. So much more. She took a stool and placed it next to Hinata's. She looked over Naruto, and his hand that Hinata still held to her forehead. Asha's eyes showed her smile. If her face did not. Hinata, is that your name? Like me, you must be awash with questions. You should have the freedom to speak first, in my opinion. No, said Hinata, shaking her head. When you didn't need to help a stranger, you were the one who saved Naruto's life. I have to sincerely thank you and insist that you ask first. With a rare smile, Asha rewarded her this time, saying, I think the young man would not be here without your assistance. But fine, I'll take the initial query. I want you to ask questions aloud. Hinata nodded and smiled briefly, asking, what is this place? The Valley of the Cosmos is the name given to this. The reason for the name is that the heavens are always accessible to us, regardless of the passage of time. Only at the edges of the valley do clouds occasionally move in and out. We are fortunate to have sunshine every day that is strong enough to support our way of life and grow our crops without being overly bright. It's always warm. Rainbows brighten the skies and the sun shines through even in the rain. It resembles an earthly paradise. As an afterthought, she added, the residents are called starlings because they danced under the stars every night in celebration of their fortunate lives, or at least when it was safe. Though she kept it in the back of her mind, Hinata shook her head incredulously at the name of the valley, the names of its residents, and the familiarity of it all. How is this location possible? Do you know that the mountains that encircle this valley are frozen and covered in snow? I am unable to respond to that. Although I've never left the valley, I've heard tales of a world beyond our own. Meeting someone from the outside world has never been enjoyable for me up until now. Asha silently watched all of this, waiting for Hinata to settle in, and said, you should get some sleep, girl. Hinata let out a sigh, let her eyes close again, and laid down the right hand that had held Naruto's, placing it on the bed beside him and leaning her entire body on the bed as well. Asha didn't ask why, but Hinata shook her head and said, I can't sleep yet. Why does everyone seem to treat me so differently, even compared to Naruto? Hinata asked. Hammond and the others who followed you seemed to think I was unique, and Jarek almost killed himself defending me against the Siomi, and you and Jarek both referred to me as a princess. I was even referred to as the Sun Princess. When you were taken to our leader in the city, that must be something you see and learn for yourself. Asha said. However, be aware that you will likely be taken aback upon arriving in our lovely city tomorrow, Asha cautioned. Hinata sighed and smiled weakly, saying, the way things have been going, that's not new. It's amusing. I didn't anticipate being attacked by a terrible artificial shadow. When I woke up this morning, I never imagined that I would be at a very close friend's bedside, wishing with all my strength that he would survive an attack of a kind I had never heard of. Being lost in a mysterious place that defied all logic was not what I had anticipated. I didn't expect to be reminded of my mother so much, she said, closing her eyes and letting out a sigh. Her voice took on an odd tone. As Asha observed Hinata's face as the memories faded, she said, I suppose it's my turn to inquire now. Hinata nodded. Girl, why are these memories resurfacing now? I'm pretty certain that I'm not the cause. When I was a young girl, I didn't think much of myself. Asha's face showed surprise, and even Avila had come over to listen carefully. My mother used to try to help me by telling me the story of a woman who came to this very valley, or at least one of the same name, and saved it from people who wanted to destroy it and blot out the light forever. The Sun Princess, it's absurd, Hinata said, biting her lip to regain control of her deteriorating emotional state. A woman who was named that because she used her special powers, said to be made of light itself, to save the sun from never shining in the Valley of the Cosmos ever again. I never in a million years imagined that I was correct about the connections between the fable my mother told me and the Temple of the Cosmos. She squeezed Naruto's hand and whispered, I wish you were here. So Asha couldn't hear her clearly. I need someone to help me, and yet I just wish I could have remembered more of the story, but I was so young. Naruto, how may I ask you more? Asha sympathized with the young girl and said, not tonight, but tomorrow, I shall reveal just how much of that story you heard as a little girl is actually true. She then asked Hinata where she and Naruto had come from, and Hinata dutifully answered, omitting only unnecessary details, talking about the ninja world, her own village, the land of fire, and the surrounding countries, as well as about her own family, her eyes, and her powers. When asked about the mysterious life source inside Naruto, Hinata spoke sparingly about the history of the Nine Tails, stating simply that Naruto was chosen to carry the beast, to keep it from attacking any other innocent people. She also discussed how they had arrived in the valley, Shikamaru and Haruki and their mission, and why they were in the mountains and the temple in the first place. This makes me think, Asha, Hinata inquired, have you noticed an odd woman here? She should resemble me in both face and eyes. She hasn't been seen in about 3 days. What have you heard? No, I'm sorry, kid, Asha said, shaking her head. I haven't, but I'll come right to you if I do. Thank you, Asha. Hinata sighed. I wish things hadn't turned out the way they did. We were sent to locate the woman, Akiko. I hope she's doing well. You have so much to worry about now, girl, Asha said. I'll keep an eye out, I swear, but it's best to concentrate on the task at hand. Come talk to an elderly woman if you can't sleep, Asha smiled. Thus, the conversation went on long into the night. The small flat was comfortably warm. Hinata closed her eyes one last time. Avila had already gone to bed at Asha's request, and the only remnants of the fire that had burned all night were embers that still retained some of their red glow. Asha? Hinata muttered. Yes, girl? What time will Naruto awaken? It's late, kid, said Asha with a smile. He is completely over the toxin. I even believe that his leg will fully recover. I swear. When you wake up tomorrow, he will be awake. However, you have to go to bed or you and him won't be able to go out tomorrow. The warmth of Naruto's hand made her eyelids heavier and gave her a sense of comfort, but she was already half asleep when she took his hand, still in hers, and rested her cheek on it while she nestled into a comfortable position on the bed from where she was still sitting on the stool. You're right, Hinata said, unable to open her eyes. Even if she wanted to, Naruto will most likely want us to leave together. This woman right here, she said quietly, is quite a remarkable person. Asha watched this with a motherly smile, and just like that, she was sound to the rest of the world. The tension of the day and the intense struggle of emotion and stress finally forgotten as Hinata slept them away. Despite her exhaustion, she managed to stay up for the majority of the night. He had heard everything since Asha and Hinata had begun talking, and now Asha could see the thoughts and intentions in his heart through his eyes as they turned to watch the sleeping girl. She turned and went to her bed, pleased with the turn of events the evening had brought, and the hope she now felt for the future of herself and her people. Her eyes rose to meet the blue ones, half open but full of alertness. She gave a knowing look. She woke up slowly, yawned, and tried to wipe the sleep from her eyes with the back of her hand. It took her a few moments to get her bearings, but when she did, she looked down at her surroundings. Bright, warm sunlight drifted in through the windows of Ash's small apartment and fell on the pale face of the girl who had slept soundly all morning, through the sounds of breakfast preparation and the chatter of early risers. Naruto. I was lying where Naruto had been the night before, and his absence after such a terrifying experience unnerved me, she said softly, her voice worried but still tinged with sleepiness. Looks like someone finally decided to wake up. Hinata's eyes lifted to meet the source of the voice that almost made her cry. Naruto, sitting at a small table with a plate of half-eaten food in front of him, appeared to be fine and wide awake, and her face could not hide the broad smile that adorned her face as she leapt up towards him and gave him a fierce embrace. Naruto. With a sigh of relief, Hinata said, "You're fine." As her words tickled Naruto's ear, Hinata was unable to see the smile he shared. "Yeah, for the most part." Naruto gestured to the shiny bruise on his head and the bandage on his leg, saying, "I still have a few battle scars, but I'm feeling way better." Hinata backed up a little, her shyness returning with the first signs of a lively blush on her cheeks. "I'm awake, at least." Asha, who was sitting in a rocking chair on the far side of the room with a cup of steaming tea in her hands, said, "The boy has a lot of spirit." She gave Naruto a reprimanded but not very serious look. "But he's not that smart." She said he had already gotten up and put food on the table when I came out to see how he was doing this morning. He ought to have been sleeping. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck and gave the two women a sheepish look. "I couldn't just lie back and do nothing." He said he started to stand up, but when he placed his entire weight on his injured leg, he grimaced. "Naruto, please try and relax, at least for a little bit." Hinata scowled. "I recover faster when I'm up and about anyway." With a solemn nod, Naruto sat back down and said, "Whatever you say, Hinata." Hinata looked at him strangely, but she accepted that he would do as she said, and the vivid blue eyes, the energy of his chakra, and the general lively appearance of the man she had almost seen die the night before filled her with too much joy to really care about such a trivial matter. After signaling for Hinata to take a seat at the chair to his right, Naruto went on, "Sit down and have something to eat." Hinata complied and took a plate of fresh fruit as he went, saying, "Asha filled me in on everything that went on yesterday so that I'm all caught up, and was just telling me about what's going to happen today." "Well, Hinata, I told you last night that our leader asked to see you," Hinata said, turning to face the woman with interest. She looked at Naruto's leg and said, "I don't know if you'll be able to make the journey right away with her." "I don't care if I have to crawl," Naruto stated in a tone that left no room for debate. "There's not a chance that she's going alone. I won't abandon her." Asha absorbed all of this in a chuckle, and Hinata put her face in her hands to conceal the even brighter red her face took on and the ecstatic smile that burst at his words. "All right," said Asha. "However, you'll need assistance of some kind." She turned to face Avila, who was occupied with a large book in the corner, and said, "Avila, could you go to the woods and find a sturdy piece of wood for the boy to use as a cane? I don't want you to ruin the recovery of that leg we worked so hard to save." Asha turned back to Hinata as Avila nodded dutifully, placed the book carefully on her cot, and hurried out of the hut. "You need to be ready for some unexpected surprises, Hinata girl, as though you were dreaming of being in a fairy tale. You voiced your worry about being thrown into this bizarre circumstance, and that's what this might look like to you. That story your mother told me, the one you told me last night. For centuries, the Valley of the Cosmos has preserved this same Talia not as a fairy tale, but as a legend along with a prophecy." Though Hinata had long suspected that there was more truth to it than she realized, Naruto and Hinata's eyes widened. So the Sun Princess, was she an actual woman? And she did, once, protect this place from malevolent sorcerers? Yes, Asha said, nodding. It was said that the Sun Princess was a unique woman. Extremely strong and totally selfless, an earthly goddess. Her abilities were beyond description, or maybe nobody actually recalls what she did when she first appeared to our people to defeat the King of Darkness. She selected 6 individuals whose virtues she felt were very strong and gave them weapons that used the sun's power to annihilate the shadow beasts in order to help her fight. Those 6 warriors are the ancestors of the fighters you saw with me yesterday, including Jarek and Hammond. Combatants. I know Jarek and Hammond, but what about the other 4? Asked Naruto, bewildered. Yes, exactly. Yesterday, when I came to your aid, you were unconscious. Naruto. Don't worry, you'll meet them soon enough. Hinata. You know them. They are Sun Princess's followers and the Valley's sworn guardians, being descended from the original Sun Warriors. It is their legacy, and they accept it without protest. They are born with it. They flourish in their positions and take pride in their heritage. So, hold on, Naruto said, narrowing his eyes in focus. Yes, all of this is a part of your home's great legend, but what has that got to do with Hinata? A knock on the door prompted Asha to turn and say, "You will see soon." She got up and walked across the room to the door, opening it to let the two girls and the man from the previous day in. Miela, Fyra, Hyun. Asha spoke to each of them individually, asking how Jarek was feeling today. Wearing the same outfit as the day before, along with her companions, Miela said, "Fine, Mistress Asha." With a pleasant smile on her face, Hyun also looked pleasant enough, smiling pleasantly at Naruto when she saw him awake, while Fyra appeared nervous. "We have made the necessary preparations for the Sua, Lady Hinata's arrival." Miela corrected herself after observing Hinata's expression, adding, "Iskard is very eager to bring her into the palace." "So, do you think the rumors are accurate?" Asha frowned and remarked, "So fast has there been any update on the dark cloud spread? Are there any more assaults?" "No more attacks since the one last night, but then again the people are too afraid to venture far outside of the city walls," Fyra said. "Many are hiding inside their homes, as if that would keep them safe." "Amintas and I went scouting last night," Hyun stated. "Along the mountains, the Siomi's usual paths, nothing at all was present." Asha scowled. "So that means," Hyun nodded, glancing covertly at Hinata and Naruto, who were observing them closely. "Umbrage senses something has changed here," Asha said with a slight growl. "That idiot, Iskard, him and his folly." "Iskard appears to be keeping a low profile," Miela remarked. "There was nothing going on when we were at the city. Still, there's a problem in Radina." Fyra said arrogantly, "That doesn't matter. Let Umbrage do what he wants. With or without a sun princess to lead us, we can still take him." As she spoke, her hand involuntarily moved to the gold-hilted weapon dangling from her hip. "Hinata, Naruto, allow me to introduce you to 3 of the 6 elite guardians of the Valley of the Cosmos." Miela, Hyun, and Fyra, they all nodded in agreement as Asha mentioned their names, and Asha turned to face the 2 people seated across from the table. "They will guide you into the city and to Iskard, our valley's appointed leader," Asha said, casting a reproachful glance at Fyra. "He wants to see you because of all the rumors that have been circulating since you defeated the Siomi last night." "Asha, you're not joining us?" Hinata asked just as Avila entered the hut once more, carrying a solid tree branch with her. It had a crude hook in it, but it would serve its purpose as a walking aid. Avila handed it to Asha, without a word as usual, and went back to her reading. "I think I would feel better if you were there." "I'm sorry, child," Asha said, "but I'm supposed to be out here, making use of my skills. Additionally, the young person under my care doesn't particularly enjoy the city," she said, turning to Avila with regret. "Here, she feels much more at ease. The city's inhabitants, they don't value her gifts as much as I do." Presents. "I recall you saying you were raising her to be the one to continue your work, but what other gifts besides that?" inquired Hinata inquisitively. "Child, are you aware of what mystics do?" Naruto and Hinata both shook their heads. A mystic is someone who has a strong bond with the earth, someone with enhanced senses, perhaps even more than an animal, who can use them to make medicines, ointments, and potions for her people's benefit. Due to extensive training from the mystic who came before me, I possess the abilities that make me a mystic. My gift is a learned one. Avila truly possesses the gift of foresight. "Really?" Naruto said. "That's fantastic. That's awesome. What does that mean?" He paused. "To have the power of premonition means that, at certain times, you can catch glimpses of the future," Hinata replied with amazement. Asha continued, "No one can predict when a vision may occur, and the gift of premonition is a very inexact one. In her life, Avila has only experienced 2 visions. One that announced Umbraged's return occurred a few moon cycles ago. The other, which happened just 4 days ago, depicted the Sun Princess's return." Asha paused to process the information, saying, "Events are typically predicted to occur during significant occasions. That explains the commotion surrounding you." Hinata, the city's residents, disliked Avila's initial vision and have treated her unfairly ever since, which is another reason why she feels so uneasy there. "I understand that." Naruto scowled. "She witnessed Hinata and I plummet into the valley, then?" "Not exactly," Asha said, shaking her head. "One does not see exact visions. They can be of anything or any time, and they can be as brief as fleeting glances or as long as dreams. To portray a premonition, one must be skilled. Avila has not yet received the training. We work together to interpret what we've witnessed after she shares the premonition with me. When visions occur so closely together like this, it is a sign that very important events are about to take place," Asha said, pausing. "It is part of our training. This is the reason Avila and I need to be on guard and concentrate on our responsibilities now more than ever." "So, you don't want to accompany us to the city as well because of her gift?" Hinata started again. and the persecution that has resulted from it, as well as your attempt to concentrate on what's been going on. Hinata was disappointed, and Asha sensed it. Child Hinata, I will be forgotten as soon as you step through those city gates and face the challenges that lie ahead. However, you are welcome to come see me if you feel that you need me. I will assist you whenever and however I can. So feel free to send me any Sun Warriors before you can go back home. I suspect you'll need all the assistance you can get to deal with the challenges that lie ahead. Hinata looked at Naruto and grinned, saying, Thank you, Asha, for everything. Yes, child, Asha said, dismissively waving her hand before heading back to her rocking chair by the fireplace. You will safely lead Hinata and Naruto to the city and the palace, Miela, she said, turning to the girl who was still standing in the room with her two friends. Don't allow anyone or anything to hurt them. No worries, Mistress Asha, Miela said sweetly, that was our obligation from the beginning. We won't avoid it now. Hinata, as well as Naruto. That's it. Indeed, would you mind following me? We will now take you to our beautiful city. You'll love it, I'm sure, with Fira and Fyun right behind her. Miela opened the door and pranced out of the hut, saying, It's gorgeous, especially in the full sun. With her heart pounding eagerly, Hinata got up from her chair, unsure of what to fully anticipate from what was about to happen. She walked first to Asha and unexpectedly gave the woman a hug. Thank you, Asha, she whispered. You don't know what services you've done for me. Hinata expressed her gratitude to Asha, hoping that Asha would understand the depth of it all. When she rose, Asha was wearing one of her infrequent smiles, and Hinata knew that she understood. She bowed politely to Asha and left the hut behind Fyun. Right behind her, Naruto turned to Asha and said, Yeah, thanks a lot, lady, with a grateful expression on his face, for allowing us to remain here and for saving me. And for this, he said, raising the cane. Asha took hold of his arm as he turned to follow Hinata outside. Young man, she said emphatically and firmly, and Naruto immediately focused all of his attention on her. That young lady is not only unique, but she will also save us all from a terrible fate, Naruto said. However, she is also in serious danger. If she is not protected at all costs, there are numerous threats to her life and to all of our lives. Naruto scowled. I can only trust you with this. She is more reliant on you than ever. After giving a nod, Naruto was about to respond when Hinata called his name. He gave Asha one last glance before leaving the hut and following the other four to the gates of the walls they had seen the previous evening. Asha watched them go, and once she was certain they were out of earshot, she turned to Avila, who was also watching her master and surrogate. Avila, Asha said, I do not feel that things are all as they seem. Pray and sharpen your senses, kid. We might soon require additional direction. It was a short walk from Asha's hut, which was outside the walls, to their destination. Naruto and Fyun led the way, with the three girls trailing closely behind. Miela, who was the most excited to meet Hinata and Naruto, kept them talking the entire way. I'm so excited to finally get to talk to you. Really talk, I mean. Miela began, I heard last night that you destroyed the Siomi with just your hands. How did you accomplish that? Well, I just used a special technique that has been passed down in my family, Hinata explained, attempting to make sense to the three warriors. When I kick or punch, I can send my attack with life energy moving through my hands and feet. The life force in the body is visible to my eyes. She stopped herself and recalled what they called chakra, life energy. I was able to destroy it. After saying, I attacked the source of that energy in the Siomi with my own chakra. Fyun said, That's fascinating, and he turned to face Naruto. Do you possess any such abilities? Yes, without a doubt. In an attempt to impress the group, Naruto remarked, I can also gather my chakra in my hands, but it's a lot at once. In addition to being incredibly powerful, it looks fantastic. Fira chuckled. Why wouldn't you destroy the Siomi on your own if it's that strong? I tried, but it moved out of the way, Naruto said, squinting his eyes at her. It would have been toast if I had struck it. So, what are you trying to say? Teased Fira. Is that you're slow? Before he could say anything, Hinata saved Naruto from the embarrassment that was rising up his neck. Naruto's attack, known as the Rasengan, is renowned from where we come from, just as my own fighting style is. In actuality, Naruto's attack is far more powerful than mine. With the help of the Siomi, my fighting style, referred to as the gentle first, is more subdued and more accurate than most. Naturally, my eyes, a genetic characteristic shared by my entire family, also play a significant role. They let me see a lot of things that others can't. That is really awesome. Though Hinata was unable to understand why, Miela's eyes were filled with admiration for her. I wish we could do that, right guys? She spoke to her pals. Fyun said thoughtfully, it would be helpful in some situations, but Fire aside, adding, but remember, Miela, we are not without our skills either. Miela said, I know that. Fyun, oh. Do you want to see our weapons? I forgot. With a joyful smile, Naruto said, "Oh, that sounds awesome." The group slowed down a little when Miela pulled out the thin sword at her side. Naruto retreated from his spot beside Fyun to examine it with Hinata, and both of them were astounded by the sword's exquisite detail. The hilt was golden, and set in the top was a crystal that appeared to be a miniature version of the one that had been used to absorb the poisoned chakra from Naruto's leg. Rainbows appeared to splay from the clear, colorless faces of the jewel as it shone brilliantly in the sunlight. When Hinata first saw the jewel, she said, "Miela, are these crystals typical in the valley? Last night, Asha used one similar to this. Was there a connection between that and the one in your weapon?" "They are the same, and they are amazing," Fyun said first. "We refer to these crystals as life crystals. They are as strong as diamonds and extremely rare. They connect with the energies of life. This includes the sun, which is present in all living things and provides for them. Our weapons work well against the Siomi because of this." He drew his own blades, which resembled Jarek's own daggers almost exactly but appeared to be long, lethal throwing knives upon closer inspection. Each blade, like Miela's, contained a small life crystal, and he explained that the energy from the sun is captured by the crystal and transformed into something that was almost magical in the metal of the blade. The metal was forged with a level of skill that has never been witnessed before. The gift of such a gifted blacksmith was lost when the Sun Princess had these made for the ancient warriors. I don't think it could be done again. "Which is okay," Fyra responded, "since these weapons have been with us for years, and have never lost their edge." They were almost on top of the craggy mountainside when Miela said, "We're just about there." They had just entered the shade created by one looming side of the valley bowl created by the mountains, and they had been following the white stone of the city wall for some time, and they had almost reached the point where it ended when it met the mountain. From what Hinata could tell, the city was half built with its back facing the mountain, probably to offer some shade from the constant sun in some places, but it could also have been to keep an eye out for potential enemies. "I know it's around here," Fyra said, gliding to the front of the group and beginning to search. "Ah, here we are." She cleared some bushes to reveal a shallow groove in the wall, and then Fyra pulled out her sword and, turning it so that the hilt's crystal faced the wall, swung it into the groove. White light glowed around the crystal, and a door creaked slightly as it swung slowly inward, scattering dust into the sunbeams. Fyun clarified that the tunnel was created by our ancestors and that only the unique life crystals found in our weapons could resonate with it. When the city was overrun in the Dark Ages, it was utilized to give the warriors a quick and covert way to enter. We don't even know where they are. "Oh, and well, you now," Fyun chuckled. Fyra winked and said, "I guess that means we have to kill you now. Come on, we have to get you to the castle before any of the villagers see you." As they proceeded down the hallway, illuminated by the light from the crystal weapons at the end of life, she added somewhat irritably, "Iskard will probably want Lady Hinata to go through some preparatory stuff." "Preparatory materials? For what precisely are you preparing?" Hinata inquired, feeling a little uneasy. "Iskard is an extremely, he'll likely want to show you off," Fyra said, describing him as a showy kind of guy. After hearing the account of Hinata defeating the Siomi yesterday, Iskard is absolutely certain that he will most likely. "Shish," Fyun begged, "we are coming out by the palace. There are people here who can hear us, so we're better off being quiet now." Miela said to Hinata and Naruto, "You two will likely be apart for a while soon, but not for long." As she observed Naruto's face, she continued, "Iskard will likely have some things he wishes to treat Hinata to. Hinata, if you need us, call upon us," Miela said. "Please rely on us. We'll try our hardest. Even we have no idea what will happen today, but given Iskard's style, you'll most likely find yourself in some awkward situations. Get ready." Hinata frowned at the referral once more to preparing herself, but once again, her time to ponder was cut short when the brighter light of day broke through a crack in front of them and blinded their sensitive eyes. When they were able to see again, they could see only the amazing white stone of a well-lit hallway from which they were entering from what appeared to be a dead end. Fyun took the lead once more, and brought them along the circular hallway, open to the outside world, and then up a hallway to a similar hallway. The hallways were dimmed only by the floor above it and the pillars that held it up. Otherwise the pure sunlight of day filtered in from the spaces between pillars and spilled onto the group, warming their skin. At the top of the stairway, Fyun turned them away from the daylight and in towards a door set into the stone. A sunburst similar to that of the main gate etched into the metallic door. Coppery tones created the hues of sunrise in the image which shone brilliantly in the light. Fyun walked up to the door. Knocking loudly, he waited, and then a voice could be heard on the other side. "State your identity and business here." Sun Warrior Fyun, with Sun Warriors Miela and Fyra, escorting Lady Hinata to Great Leader Iskard. The other side was silent, but after a moment, the large metal doors opened to let them enter the inner keep. Fyun gave them a crooked smile and gestured for them to follow. Naruto and Hinata entered a dimly lit room with a single glass dome at the top to let in sunlight. Hinata looked up to see that the majority of the ceiling had been made of glass, but had been frosted over, and the room's edges were dark and dingy, with the only source of heat and light being the glass dome. She shivered and looked at the sides of the room, and from the slivers of light that edged around the room, she could see the bodies of men lining the room with swords at their hips, watching the incoming group like hawks. Squinting through the beam of light, she saw the outline of a sort of throne, and a man, with two men on either side of him, stood in front of it. She guessed that it was Iskard. At that moment, the group stopped as the man in question moved, walked toward them, and stepped into the light, which lighted up every part of his face. From a distance, he was a fairly tall man with colorful robes and a large feathered headdress. He had a long, thin nose that made him look like a bird. He was lanky and seemed weak, twitching his thumbs and tapping his foot nervously. Naruto thought he looked like a large parrot and smiled cheekily at the thought. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he looked as well. "Is that who I believe it to be?" The man grinned broadly and said, "Come closer, young one, closer, let me see you closer." As he gazed at Hinata, she felt her skin turn cold. She didn't like having all of the eyes on her, but she obeyed, and she heard Naruto, who was closely observing the man, approach her. Upon closer inspection, he was extremely slender, but the weakness Naruto had observed was absent. The man carried himself with pride, and his expression conveyed satisfaction at seeing the young girl in front of him. He motioned for Hinata to approach him even more, which she reluctantly did, and he gave her a bow that was adorned. "My princess," he said to her in a wheedling voice full of respect and adoration, "I appreciate you meeting me at such short notice. It is a privilege to be here with you. My name is Iskard." Hinata shied her eyes away at the comments, but she saw Iskard turn and face Naruto, who had walked up to him as well. Iskard frowned. "Who is this?" Miela said humbly from behind. "This is Naruto Uzumaki, great leader. He was traveling with Lady Hinata when they both came here." "Yes, but why is he in this place? He is not the Princess of Prophecy." Iskard growled. "He has no place here." "What's the big idea? Hey, I never did anything to you, and besides," sneered Naruto, insulted. Everyone turned to Hinata and said, "Wherever I go, he goes. There isn't any other option. It is expected of us to support one another, and I plan to do so. He must be welcomed as well if you want me to remain your guest." "As you wish, my princess," Iskard said, grinning at Naruto but turning to Hinata. "It will happen the way you desire. We can't wait any longer. We have to get you ready to see your subjects in the city." "Subjects?" Hinata asked. "Are you ready? Do you want me to do anything?" Iskard turned to his right and said, "Don't worry." He clapped his hands and one of the men who were lining the room approached him. He whispered to the man, who nodded when he gave the order. Iskard then turned back to Hinata and said, "I hope you follow this man. He will show you some of the female servants who take care of the palace's maintenance. Because he is a city guard, they will see to it that you are appropriately attired to welcome our people. You can be sure that you will receive royal treatment." Hinata flinched at what he said, but she saw no choice but to comply, so she closed her eyes, hoping that if she were left alone for a while, doing whatever it was he asked her to do, she would be able to decipher exactly what Iskard had in store for her. But she did know that she would not like it if he treated her like royalty. She said, "As you wish, Iskard," and went to the guard. "How about me, then? I'm also a guest here, and I'm going out to meet the people," Naruto said, turning to face Iskard. "Should I buy new clothes?" After giving Naruto a quick glance, Iskard shrugged and said, "No, you're okay in any case. Wearing new clothes won't help you." As Naruto glared at Iskard, blush crept up his neck and he said, "Fine, but I'm staying with Hinata." Iskard clucked, "Oh no, you can't do that. The princess needs to be bathed and dressed in the Sun Princess's traditional attire and accessories. You must agree that you can't be there when this is happening, don't you?" "Oh no," but Naruto sputtered, "No, it's not appropriate, but," and turned to Hinata for assistance. "I would like Naruto to be posted outside the room where this is going to happen. If that's okay with you, is it possible to make this happen?" With hope, Hinata asked Iskard, comforted by the idea of Naruto close by, even if it was just outside her door. Iskard turned to the guard and scowled, saying, yes, very well. Make sure he stays outside the door, and does not taint the princess's preparations." With a nod, the guard left the room without saying anything. Hinata was hesitant to follow, but when no one else moved, she did, and Naruto followed her, limping, catching up to her as they were leaving the door. Miela spoke up at the door. "Lady Hinata, Before you go out to greet the public, we will meet with you, don't worry, we'll be there to greet you when you exit the palace. Hinata waved and grinned at her as she and Naruto left, and the guard led them in the opposite direction from where they had come from. Hinata took a deep breath. Her mind was racing, so many things were happening at once, and she felt overwhelmed. Iskard and many people in the Valley of the Cosmos believed she was the reincarnated deity of their past, a woman with mystic ability. No, she checked herself and she knew from the way the Siomi responded to her attacks that the life force and magic mentioned was chakra. The Sun Princess appeared to have been a ninja of some kind, with training comparable to hers, which is why they were so certain she was descended from this legend. It had to be. She shook her head, saying that no, she was a Konoha ninja, and her family had a long history. There were no records anywhere that showed her family was descended from such a woman, but why were people so certain? Are you thinking about something? We've been walking for a minute, and you haven't said a word to me, Naruto said softly, waking her from her reverie. Are you alright? Alright, to be honest, I'm a little confused about everything, Hinata said. In fact, I'm treated like a princess here. I dislike that. Why not? Most people would love to be royalty, Naruto said, perplexed. In addition, you did a lot to that previous monster. Even if you were not the real princess, you at least possess some of her authority. Don't you see, Naruto? She saw Naruto's mouth drop. Remember, we're Konoha ninja, and we have a mission. While we're here acting like royalty, Akiko Kimura might be dying somewhere. In reality, we ought to return to that lake and look for a means of getting back to Shikamaru and Haruki. Naruto scowled slightly and said, I understand. He looked up at the guard escorting them and said, I don't think we could leave now if we tried. It's just that so much is going on. Didn't that bird guy back there seem to have a plan? For whatever reason, he is making all of this effort to get you prepared. I doubt he would allow us to be so independent. So what do we do? Hinata nodded. We simply must follow these men's instructions here. We're pretty much at a loss for options. Most likely, Akiko is present. Perhaps we can find out where she is if we stay and inquire. Okay, Naruto, you're right. Hinata looked nervous, not liking the idea of staying here any longer, and although she had been intrigued in the past, the thought of being treated like a princess again made her feel a little queasy. She also realized that Naruto's reasoning was their only remaining option. We're here, the guard said. Wait here, please. He vanished into a room for a brief moment before Hinata and Naruto heard two middle-aged women with excited expressions on their faces and squeals of excitement coming from the next room. Yes, she does resemble the statue of the Sun Princess exactly. As she ran her fingers through Hinata's hair, a woman with black hair pulled up in a bun clucked, but she needs a bath mightily. Take a look at her hair. What a mess. Indignantly, Hinata flushed. My hair. What's wrong with? And those garments? She blew a strand of her reddish hair out of her face, looked at Hinata, and grinned, saying, well, we have the perfect dress for you. One that Master Iskard had made specifically for you. They're so strange, not to mention filthy. Tisk the other, princess, she said, her smile widening. We'll clean you up and get you looking your best. In no time you'll feel powerful and regal, just as you deserve to be. Before either woman could say another word to the other, they disappeared into the room with Hinata, leaving Naruto completely confused and Hinata's pride slightly bruised. The last thing Hinata saw before being swooped into the room was Naruto's bewildered expression. A bucket of lukewarm water was thrown over Hinata's head, causing her hair to fly into her eyes and face, causing her to gasp aloud. She sputtered as she attempted to remove the hair from her eyes, but she realized she was not making any progress when she saw another bucket of water over her head. Undoing her work, she halted her motion and simply allowed the two women to continue their activities. The air was warm from the late morning sunlight streaming in through the windows, but she was naked and only partially submerged in the water. While the other woman ran around the room gathering items for her once she was clean and dry, the first woman washed her hair while humming a soft melody to herself. They didn't say anything to her. It felt exactly like home. She gave a grimace. There was a moment of hesitation on the part of the woman lathering the fragrant shampoo into her hair. Oh, I'm sorry milady, did I hurt you? I shall try and be more careful. Hinata gave a headshake. No, it's all right. If you don't mind me asking, why do you address me as that? The woman was taken aback. Why, wasn't it you who defeated the demon last night? Yes, I was, but, well, Iskard told us all that the Sun Princess would fall from the sky, from a faraway land and destroy a shadow demon. You did all of that, so you must be her. But do you mean you wished to be addressed as princess instead? Hinata reflected. Iskard, I should have known. He's already spreading this stupid rumor without any knowledge on who I am. I'm no Sun Princess. She sighed. She was reminded of all the awful times she had spent at home after years of resolving their differences. She and her father were now even on good terms. Hanabi was her cute but feisty younger sister, and Neji was her adored cousin. She also adored them and her entire clan. However, the added annoyance of being treated as though she was superior to everyone else came with being the head of the household. And she detested it to the core. Naturally, she had grown accustomed to it. She occasionally even relished having her fellow clan members go with her around the Leaf Village while she went about her daily activities. She rarely had privacy, though her clan would send out a search party if she was in the village and didn't return by a specific curfew. She had only truly experienced freedom while performing her ninja duties, when she was expected to carry her own weight and was trusted, where she had to demonstrate that she wasn't a burden or risk the repercussions of endangering her allies within her family. She was valued for her achievements rather than her birthplace. She felt sick to her stomach because she was now receiving more royal treatment than ever before. For less justification, she wished she could simply leap from that water tub and take off running. However, Hinata once more sensed that her new title was gradually stifling her freedom. She didn't deserve it at all. Hinata let out a deeper sigh. "You'll be all cleaned up again soon, princess," said the woman, who was now washing the shampoo out of her hair. Hinata forced a grin. "Please, call me Hinata. Thank you for helping me to clean up. It feels nice. I can't remember the last time I was able to wash properly." The other woman, who had now gone to fetch soap, said, "It's unbelievable that you don't have any servants with you. You were a princess, after all, so you don't always look like this." Hinata muttered to herself, "Well, actually I'm not a princess where I come from. I'm not a real princess here." As she poured more water over her head to rinse the soap out of her hair, the woman remarked, "Well, you killed that beast, so we at least owe you our gratitude." Hinata felt the woman lead her by the shoulders to stand just as she believed she was finished. Little rivers of water flowed down her body. She got goosebumps all over her body and shivered when she stood in the air after leaving the warm water entirely. Every time she began to scrub at a particularly stubborn dirt spot, the woman felt the rough cloth against her skin as she began to apply soap. Hinata was made even more uncomfortable by the fact that she cleaned every inch of her body. "You know, you don't have to do this for me. Iskard told us that you should be treated as best as possible and that you should be absolutely radiant, and we are honored to do this for you," the woman said, either ignoring or forgetting Hinata's request. They turned to see a knock on the door. The voice of Naruto called in a hesitant tone, "Hinata. What's going on in there? Are you coming out soon?" "Oh." Hinata began to respond, but was interrupted by the woman rushing back and forth with cloths. Without pausing, the other woman said, "She'll be out soon." She arranged smaller accessories and fabric on a table beside Hinata. Hinata gave them a wary look. Hinata said, "Where are my clothes?" to the woman. "Oh, you mean the strange things you were wearing when you got here? Iskard told us to discard them." "What?" scowled Hinata. "He had no right to do that." "Well, we did save some stuff, your leather pouches with tools in them." Hinata hurriedly inquired, "What about my forehead protector? The metallic band on a black bandana, I wore it around my neck." The woman paused and looked away. Hinata's heart sagged. "Not my forehead protector." Hinata's voice rose, and Naruto's anxious voice reverberated into the room, asking, "Hinata, is anything wrong?" Hinata clicked her tongue in disappointment and annoyance, saying, "Tisk." It appeared as though she would not receive anything of her desire. "Naruto, please don't worry, I'll be out soon." "Okay, but I could explore." Hinata yelled. "Wait." Before she had a chance to stop herself, she blushed and made an effort to look less pitiful than she actually felt. "Please just wait for me," she asked. After waiting, Naruto's voice reached her ears. "Okay, I'll be here." Hinata tried to calm her trembling body and mind by closing her eyes and inhaling. She looked over at the two women who were putting her new clothes on display for her. She was aware that they had been paying close attention and making judgments. She was indifferent at home. She saw it frequently enough. Resigned, she raised her arms and let the dress be put on her without saying anything more. While they talked about the clothes they were using to dress her, the women proceeded to style her hair and make sure everything was done correctly. After they were done, Hinata was shocked to see how much she liked her outfit when she looked in the mirror. Her hair was styled in a long, loose braid down her back, and it was shining. It was a simple but lovely dress that Iskard had ordered to be made for her. Hinata may have felt a little self-conscious about the material's clinginess to her body, but for some reason, it gave her more self-assurance. At times it seemed to emit its own light, and the dress was the purest white Hinata had ever seen, even though she didn't particularly like the armbands that encircled her upper arm. She liked them all because of their past. Iskard had also left her some bangles to wear. She recalled the discussion she had when the jewelry was presented to her for her to wear. Glancing at the tray of gleaming items, Hinata questioned, "Are these gold bands and this diadem also items that Iskard had made for the next Sun Princess?" "No," the woman who was holding them said. A nostalgic expression came into her eyes as she said, "These were actually left by the Sun Princess of all the legends." "Really?" Hinata exhaled. Glancing again at the bands and diadem, Hinata reasoned that she couldn't have distinguished between the two if it were true, and the accessories were as old as the legend. They had no tarnish and were gleaming like new. Before the women could pick up the diadem, she reached over to where the golden jewelry was lying, waiting for her to adorn them. It was surprisingly light in Hinata's hand. She was astounded by its elaborate design when she looked at it. Very tiny life crystals outlined the diadem's spires. She examined the other gold accessories, each of which was beautifully crafted and as elaborately designed as the diadem. Maybe she wouldn't mind wearing this, she told herself. Her attention was abruptly drawn to something beneath the remaining golden jewelry. Leaning as far as she could, she removed a magnificent pendant from the pile. The necklace hanging from Hinata's fingers captivated her. A half-sun-shaped locket hung from Hinata's hand on a thin but sturdy gold chain, swinging back and forth like a pendulum. She watched that necklace sparkle in the mirror and traced it with her hand. Now she was captivated by the small necklace. Her fingers followed the sun's bulb, the tiny crack on the bottom caused by age and use, and each fragile sunray that protruded equally from the other. Hinata preferred it over the other ancient remnants of the legend, despite the fact that it was the only one that revealed its age. Hinata turned to go out the door after completing their tasks and going about their own business. The women who had been waiting for her instructed her to complete her own preparations before heading back outside to follow the guard who had escorted her there. Recalling her mother's description from the fairy tale, Hinata had been experimenting with her new appearance ever since. She had to get back on track now. Taking her ninja tools that the women had saved, she fastened them to the golden belt that came with the dress. Before leaving it dangled loosely over her hip, she turned to face the mirror again, and as her arm reached her neck where her headband had been, she became uncomfortable upon realizing the necklace was there. However, Naruto had been waiting long enough for her. She made her way to the door. She opened the door and asked, "Naruto?" But there was no sign of him. As she stepped outside, she noticed the guard but not Naruto. Once more, she called his name, "Naruto." She turned to face him as he jogged up the hall from where they had come, and he said, "You're out finally. I was getting whoa." When he finally noticed that her clothes had changed, she flushed in shame, and he began to examine her, asking, "What's wrong? Where in the world did you get this get-up from?" He inquired. "You didn't have this packed with you, did you? It's not very well, you." "No, it's not," she replied. "Apparently they've been expecting the Sun Princess for some while, and had this dress made. It's nice, though, I think, even if it's supposed to be for someone else." Naruto remarked, "It looks great on you," which caused her to flush even more. "But I dunno, it's going to take a lot of getting used to." "Hey," the guard said, cutting them off, "if you're done here, I have orders to get you moving to meet Iskard." Hinata simply nodded, but Naruto scowled at being cut off in the middle of his sentence. "All right, let's get this over with." Naruto and Hinata dutifully followed the guard as he nodded and began to walk to their destination. The white stone hallway was occasionally illuminated by holes, which kept the air cool while providing enough light to see through. They couldn't even tell which part of the castle they were in because the small windows were too high to see out of. With a sidelong glance at Hinata, Naruto asked, "What do you think is going to happen next? I mean, I know Iskard wants you to introduce yourself to the villagers, but why? It has to do with them thinking I'm this Sun Princess. I don't know, to be honest, but I hope that there isn't too many people, since I wouldn't even know what to say." The group began to descend a set of winding steps, and Naruto grimaced as his injured leg stepped. "I guess all we really can do is wait, but I don't like not knowing what's going on. My leg still stings, but it feels like it's healing up at least." Hinata grinned. "That's good news. I'm glad. I was afraid when you had injured it. I didn't know if you'd be able to continue traveling with me." "Hinata, I'd never leave you alone in this strange place, even if I never had legs at all." Hinata nodded, fully aware that what he had said was true. "Thank you." They kept walking in silence for a few minutes before entering a spacious, open room at the end of a lengthy hallway. From the balcony they were on, two staircases led down to a foyer. The room's focal points were stained glass windows and a floor composed of smooth stone that had been lacquered to appear as smooth as glass. Hinata thought they were walking through rainbows as see-through colors splashed across the floor. They found Iskard waiting for them at the bottom, in front of two big wooden doors, with Miela, Fyra, and Fyun. As she and Naruto began to descend the stairs in their direction, Iskard greeted her, saying, "Ah, Sun Princess, you look stunning." Hinata, beginning to grow irritated, repeated, "Hinata, please." Iskard said, "Yes, well," without really listening to her, "please follow me. The subjects of Radina, the Starlings, would really like to meet you." "Now wait," Naruto said, "why are we doing all of this? Why does Hinata need to introduce herself at all? I want to know what this is all about." With a look of surprise, Iskard said, "Of course the Sun Princess must say hello to the people she helped save a lifetime ago." "Iskard," said Hinata, "I am not this Sun Princess you speak of, and I'm not going to pretend to be. I am an ordinary girl, a ninja from the village hidden in the leaves. I will not go out there and tell those people I am someone I'm not." For a moment, Iskard's face did not move. "Ah, then at least," he said, "you must introduce yourself as the woman who destroyed a Siomi with her bare hands, and saved their fellow villagers from being attacked last night. They want to meet the woman who saved them from another Siomi attack." Hinata has halted. "Oh." Iskard took advantage of the situation without saying another word. He turned and threw open the doors, allowing the light of the day outside to flood the room. "Yes, we must introduce the woman who protected them from the curse. They are so eager to meet you. Let's not keep them waiting." As he rushed forward, Hinata raised her arm to protect her eyes from the sun's glare. She heard an odd sound that was gradually growing louder as she lowered her arm. In order to position herself between Naruto and Fyun in front of the group, Fire shoved Hinata in front of her. Already, as the doors widened, the noise increased proportionately. Hinata closed her eyes as sunlight flared from the slit in the gates, but she was still blind. She kept them closed because she could hear the noise more clearly and could tell that people were cheering louder and louder. She felt her heart racing. She muttered, "How many people are out there?" but was overpowered by the applause. The crowd's depth was revealed as the gates fully opened. The city center's white cobblestone plaza was crowded with thousands of people. The crowd of people pressed in on one another, desperate to get close enough to see the sight they had gathered to witness, and that was all that was visible. They gave the Sun Princess a cheer. They applauded her. She stopped. Miela urged Hinata to continue walking straight ahead, saying, "We'll be with you." But Hinata was so stunned into a state of stupor that she was unable to even register Miela's words, much less will her feet to move. She was unaware of the familiar defensive position she had assumed, arms in front of her body, or the intense trembling that began in her legs and spread throughout her entire body. All she knew was that everyone had gathered to watch her make her way from the castle to the elevated platform in front of her. They were all waiting for her to perform a miracle. While they stared at her, the pressure was too great. A sensation of warmth touched her hand, moved up her arm, and then filled her entire body. She was sufficiently awakened to turn her head in the direction of the pleasurable stimulus. Her gaze locked with Naruto's. "You can do it, Hinata. Just focus on the end of the road. I'll be right next to you. I promised I wouldn't leave your side." Hinata was momentarily paralyzed for yet another reason, but she nodded and took in what he had said. She attempted, but was unable, to return Naruto's comforting smile. She inhaled tremblingly and looked straight ahead. The applause seemed to intensify as she took a test step forward. As she walked to the stage, she wanted to stop, flee from the crowd, and hide from everyone who was watching her. She knew that was not possible. As a ninja, she was expected to be able to overcome fear and danger and carry out her duties. She was a ninja. Still holding her hand, Naruto urged her to move forward. After taking a more confident step forward, Hinata began to walk steadily up the path. The audience doubled their cheering efforts, as if they were enjoying it even more. She had the opportunity to glance to her sides when she was halfway to the stage. As hundreds of people called for the Sun Princess, their savior, their eyes met hers, all of them wearing cheery, hopeful expressions of joy. Youngsters battled to get a glimpse of the woman from all their fairy tales by squeezing past their taller classmates. There were cries of hope and calls of joy from both men and women. After hearing and seeing all of this, Hinata found herself on the verge of a smile. As her brief journey came to an end, the sun continued to shine on them, bathing everything in lovely pastel hues. She could feel her face getting warmer. It made her brave. The starlings became even more proud of Hinata as she lifted an arm and began to wave to the audience, making them cheer even louder for her. When Naruto turned to face her, he smiled, but he felt a twinge of jealousy. He felt a little guilty as he slapped it back. The platform in front of them caught both ninjas' attention. A big spouting fountain with sunburst patterns on its basin spewed rainbows out of its water. The rest of the city was hidden from them by the spouting water, but Hinata was too preoccupied with the people and the dais to notice. But Naruto made a valiant effort to discover what else this weird, enigmatic city had to offer. He also paid attention to the people on stage who were waiting for them when he knew he couldn't. In front of them, beneath the stage, were three men. He recognized Jarek and Hammond, who appeared to be uninjured, though Naruto had a sneaking suspicion that he was in more pain than he was letting on. The other man standing with them was a big, tall, broad-shouldered brute. He had scruff lining his jaw and light ginger hair. Hammond and the other man had big broadswords on their backs, but they all wore the same clothes as Miela, Fyra, and Fyun. Jarek's daggers were still in their sheaths by his sides. They grinned at the 5 individuals who were approaching them. Jarek watched Hinata approach, and he was beaming. The 3 warriors bowed as they met the 5 at the bottom of the steps. Stepping forward, Jarek knelt at Hinata's feet. To Hinata's discomfiture, he took her hand and planted a kiss on it. "My lady," he said lovingly, "welcome to our modest city of Radina. I hope you have a good time." At his side, Hammond shook his head. He looked thoughtfully at Hinata and Naruto and remarked, "I doubt it. That old fool Iskard has something up his sleeve." Hammond received a stern look from Miela. The red-headed man stood beside Fyun, who boldly stepped forward and said, "Hinata, Naruto, this is Amintas." With a bold smile, the large man held out his hand for Naruto to shake. He bowed graciously to Hinata. His loud voice was pleasant to listen to despite the man's appearance. "Hello little lady," he said, "it is nice to meet you at last. I look forward to getting to know you and the boy who travels with you more." Hinata grinned at the generosity of Amintas. "Yes, I would like that she said, glancing uncomfortably at the stairway. Iskard seemed to ignore everyone else as he walked up the stairs and whisked past her. He glanced back at the top and pushed her impatiently up the stairs. Murmured, "Let us go, and so he can introduce you to the villagers he doesn't like." To me kept waiting, and I'm sure everyone is very excited. With Miela, Hammond and Jarek walked slowly up the stairs, with Jarek displaying minimal slowness despite his injuries. Fyra, Fyun, and Amintas trailed behind Naruto and Hinata as they walked. The crowd's cheering had died down, but as they climbed the dais' steps, they could still hear their murmurs. When the group arrived at the summit, the 3 warriors ahead of them parted, revealing Hinata to Iskard and the throng in front of her. Hinata's bravery ebbed once more. "I want to welcome you to your subjects." Whispering, "Subjects?" Quote. Hinata said to Naruto's distaste. Iskard put his arm around her shoulder and escorted her to the front of the dais, ignoring the starlings who followed her every step and hung on everything that was near her. This was a heavy burden for Hinata, and she was aware that the perspiration she felt on her forehead and small of her back was not caused by the sunlight shining on them. Dread made her sick, and she detested the predicament she found herself in. The sensation she was getting from what was about to happen did not sit well with her. She made an effort to prepare herself. After pushing her nearly to the platform's edge, Iskard held up his hands to the audience as everyone waited to hear what Iskard had to say. The whispers stopped. Hinata felt the hair on the back of her neck stand on end due to the electrifying excitement of the crowd. "Starlings of Radina," Iskard began in a loud voice that rang out into the crowd, "dwellers of the Valley of the Cosmos, today we have gathered because our prayers have been answered. No longer shall we hide within the walls, afraid to tend to our crops or to hunt or fish. Today we see the return of that great deity of legend, the one who shall save us all. The Sun Princess has returned to us." The audience cheered her on loudly, and Hinata started to feel lightheaded as she listened to the people's cries of hope. She spread her feet wider to maintain her balance. For what duration had they been assured that the Sun Princess would come back to them? How many falsehoods about her had Iskard told them? She had been tricked by Iskard into pretending to be someone she wasn't. Now that she was not who Iskard had claimed to be, how could she tell them? She inhaled deeply to steady herself. Iskard signaled for the crowd to quiet down for him by raising and then lowering his hands. Furthermore, he continued, staring sidelong at Hinata and then forward once more, "It has been agreed upon that the strife we have lived with now for far too long will end. Our fair and glorious princess, along with her warriors of light, will plan an attack and slay the King of Darkness, and in mere days we shall once again feel free to venture outside these walls and continue our balanced and peaceful life, free from fear and pain." Startled by his remarks, Naruto began to speak, but was stopped in his tracks when an arm crossed his chest. Despite his anger, Hammond shook his head at Naruto. Knowing that creating a scene would only make Hinata more uncomfortable, Naruto hissed, "I can't just let him force Hinata to do something that dangerous. He's pretty much making promises for her and you. That's not fair to do to her. Especially something like this. We've been here less than a day, we don't even know what the heck we're up against." Although he was clearly uncomfortable with the scene, Hammond watched Hinata and said, "Naruto, I know, but please," adding, "you must leave this. Be making a scene would make things worse, and Iskard has an agenda. He will not let her go without making her promise to do this one way or another. Her fate was sealed when she killed the Siomi." Naruto began to say, "I can't just let this go," but was interrupted by Hinata's voice. "People of Radina," she started out quietly, her voice low but gradually rising in pitch, I need time to assess the situation, please. I'm a stranger here, and I do not know what is truly going on here. All I asked for is time to find out what it is that must be done, and if I'm the right person for the job. I apologize. Iskard's expression turned pale. He hadn't taken into consideration Hinata's actual refusal. Some of the people in front of her began to yell in terror as the others murmured anxiously. Iskard began, "But you are our sun princess, so you must be kidding." Hinata stepped back and approached the others, whispering, "Please, don't," so that only those on stage could hear. Exploding onto the stage, Naruto yelled, "You had absolutely no right to put her in that position," and charged at Iskard. "We just got here yesterday. We were attacked by this giant monster, were pushed into this city in front of a bunch of people, and then you have the cowardice to force her to fight something that's not even technically our problem." The touch of Hinata's hand on Naruto's shoulder caused him to halt. He was startled to see something like resolve in her eyes as he looked at her. However, he was also aware of the lingering confusion and sadness. Hinata turned to Iskard and said, "Please stop. Naruto, it's okay. All I ask is for some time to walk among the crowd and to talk, to get information and to find my mind. With all of this in an hour I shall be ready. That's all I ask." "Hinata, don't bargain with this jerk," said Naruto. "He just tried to force you into a battle without even properly asking you. He pretty much tried to get you killed without even letting you know." Iskard had a serious expression. "Of course, princess. Call me Hinata." Iskard's lips curled slightly in frustration. He quickly pivoted on his heel and turned to face the audience, saying, "Yes, of course Hinata, as you wish. Starlings, our princess has requested that she mingle with her people, so that she may learn more of her old self. Return to the festivities of this joyous day, and may those who are graced with an audience with the Sun Princess feel the strength of her power and blessing upon you." The crowd made a brief sound of agreement before gradually moving to the sides of the main plaza to play games and eat from the wide variety of food being offered. Despite the fact that everyone's mood was noticeably off, Iskard gave Hinata a quick glance before stumbling off in the direction of a tiny, private pavilion in the shade. Hinata hunched her shoulders. Hinata said softly, "I feel like I upset him very much." Still glaring after the man, Naruto muttered darkly, "Who cares?" But Niella interrupted. "He is a man who wants what he wants. I suppose he means well, but even I admit I've never seen him so forceful. He disrespected you, and for that I am sorry. I'm sure he'll cool down after a while." Still, she continued, "I never expected him to think we could be prepared in days." Aminta said, "So what is your plan now, Hinata? You seem to not believe in your identity as the Sun Princess. I can understand this. It is much to accept after living in a distant place, but your abilities, they are remarkably similar to those of legend." It is easy to understand why Iskard is angered. "Yeah, why's that?" inquired Naruto. "He must also feels undoubtedly that you are the Lady of Legend reborn by refusing outright to help. He is scared that you will not take up the calling, and doom us all his hopes ride on the decision you reach after the hour. But in the end, young lady, this is your decision. Whatever you decide, Hinata," Fira said, "we will still do our duty, and we will still call you friend for what you did first the day before you rid us of one Siomi, at least, and saved Jarek. For that we are in your debt." Hinata grinned. She turned to Naruto and said, "Thank you, everyone. Can you please give me some time by myself, Naruto? I need to figure this out, but I need to do it alone." Naruto wanted to protest, but he understood what she needed. "Yeah, but, fine, but I'll be close by keeping an eye on stuff, making sure you don't get into trouble, okay?" Hinata grinned. "Okay, you can check to see what food is available." "Food?" Naruto asked with a silly smile as he considered filling his empty stomach, and Hinata knew he would be alright. She turned and walked through the crowds in the hopes of finding something that would lead her to an answer. "I'll be back in an hour with an answer. Wish me luck." Hinata had to acknowledge that Radina was among the most exquisite cities she had ever seen, now that she had the time to appreciate it. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, a city so old that it seemed to have been constructed just yesterday, yet it had an enduring charm. Tall, well-organized columns dotted the mountainside, indicating the existence of outdoor passageways and balconies, while the city's larger structures were seamless white stone, matching the outer wall. The weather was never cool enough to justify glass panes in the windows. Painted wooden shutters served as a wind and rain barrier. The city's smaller structures, which Hinata assumed were for residential use, were composed of wood and featured vibrant murals that showed everyday activities like fishing, hunting, and crop harvesting. She was captivated by the depth of the vivid colors and astounded by how vividly the simple and antiquated paintings appeared on the wooden walls. And the murals of the Sun Princess and the legend she left behind were painfully real to her. She was walking on smooth light gray cobblestone with bricks of red and orange strewn throughout, On a peaceful side street far from the throng of people in the square, her mouth would water and her heart would ache for home, where things were easier, as she would occasionally look up to see the shy looks of women and children peering from open doorsteps where the smells of freshly baked bread and sweets drifted on the breeze. Unaware of her internal conflict, Hinata could hear the celebrations of the day going on behind her. She had walked among the Radina residents who were present at the festivities when she had first left Naruto, and the warriors, some of the braver souls, came up to her and thanked her for coming back, but she was unable to say much more than nod and smile weakly, which apparently didn't bother them too much. The people seemed to find even her smile sufficient, as they returned her wide smile and joined in the celebrations, leaving her even more conflicted and perplexed than before. That was why she had departed the plaza as soon as a gap had opened, removing herself from the uneasy crowds by using her apparently innate ability to blend in. She was still surrounded by excited whispers and the looks of random onlookers. If only they knew, she mused sorrowfully. She noticed that she was strolling down a more peaceful side street. When she looked up around her, the only sound was the flapping of colored flags that hung from the little wooden huts and blew in the breeze. She had discovered a street that was empty of people who had arrived at the square while in her little days. She sighed with relief that she was at last alone. She kept walking, but much more slowly, and she lost all sense of time, which allowed her to finally think. That one thought, which still perplexed her, was the first thing she said. I really don't know what they expect of me. They think so highly of me, yet they don't even know who I really am though. I guess, even some help is better than none. No matter what quality it is, they treat me like I've lived here forever, and I've done them some sort of service, but I destroyed one monster in defense, and I don't even know if that was a fluke. I may never be able to do that again, and if I can't, then Naruto and I, and whoever else trusted me to help them, may end up losing their lives. Hinata paused and nervously bit her lip. Unlike Shikamaru, her father, or even Neji, she was not a born leader. She didn't know how she could lead someone into combat and have them completely depend on her to protect them. There was so much responsibility. I don't know if I can do that. I don't think I have the power to be that leader, but can I say no to that crowd? They expect me to do so much. Hinata recalled the dissatisfied expressions on the starlings' faces when she had requested an hour to come up with a response. The fear of falling short. Hinata gave a small, bewildered groan and shook her head to get her thoughts straight. Through the white picket fence to her left, two pairs of eyes were staring directly at her, but she was too preoccupied to notice them. She kept moving down the small side street at a leisurely pace. How do I decide how to continue? I see no other option but to accept it, but I have my own mission which brought us here. We have to regroup with Shikamaru and Haruki, and find Akikoa if she's even still Olivia. Hinata sighed. We have lost so much time already here with everything that has happened, and Naruto is still not fully held. There's just so much happening. Then she heard the soft breath behind her, like the sigh of a wind. With her Byakugan activated and her stance ready to defend, Hinata spun around and noticed two children's undeveloped chakra outlines concealed behind the fence. Oh! Hinata uttered as she recognized what she was staring at. Her rapid responses caused the small bodies to tense and wilt. She whispered to them, "It's okay. Little ones, you startled me, but it's okay. You're okay. Can you come out?" Two young girls, neither yet 10 years old, emerged from behind the fence wearing white dresses similar to Hinata's, but with a lower quality fabric and a duller color, indicating general age and less upkeep. The taller girl, who appeared to be the more mature and courageous of the two, dared to approach the shorter one. "Hello, are you the Sun Princess?" Hinata sighed and scowled slightly. Everyone, even Radina's young people, seemed to recognize her. "That is what I have been called since coming, but please, call me Hinata. And whom do I have the pleasure of speaking with?" "I am Heather, a simple girl of the town, and this is my sister, Lily. We were in the square, but we couldn't hear you that well. We wanted to see the woman that our mother told us about," Heather said hurriedly, "but you ran away after only a moment, and we didn't know why. We followed you as best we could, and we finally tracked you down." The young girl initially appeared stunned, but she soon realized Hinata's wishes. Hinata grinned and tried to reassure the girls, saying, "Oh well, I just needed to step back and clear my head. Where I'm from, I'm quite shy, actually, and I'm not used to such crowds." From behind Heather, Lily asked, "Where are you from? You're not from here." "No, Sia." Hinata paused. "Were you told the story of how I actually came to be in the valley?" "No," replied Heather. "Iscard sent many royal messengers to every adult in Radina, and just said that the reincarnate Sun Princess had returned to us, and that there would be a royal address today." Hinata pondered. So that's why people don't seem to understand Iscard's devious methods of attempting to convince the populace that he had the situation under control were the cause. Not their fault. It was, to put it mildly, a deceptive and dishonest strategy, and now, the people have a false hope in me. which could leave them vulnerable, she sighed. But, you know, Heather went on, you look so strong, Hinata. I didn't doubt for a second that you defeated that Siomi, like Iskard and the adults were saying. Hinata stammered for a second. What? Yeah, Lily said with a soft smile, you look so strong and you are very attractive. For the first time, Hinata received sincere praise. Thank you, she stammered, but, girl, so the thing is, Iskard is calling me the Sun Princess, but I don't know if that's who I am, or if I can do what she is supposed to do. I'm a simple girl from a place where magic isn't used, and the legend of the Sun Princess was just that, a legend. I came here for a completely different reason, and it was fate that brought me here, and ever since I've been caught up in this rush of events, and it's a confusing, scary, Hinata sighed, looking from girl to girl, terrified to see expressions of sadness at having their illusion shattered, but their expressions were more determined and sympathetic. She was taken aback. See, the thing is, Heather started once more, it doesn't matter to me, or anyone else, that you aren't from here, or that you may not be the true legendary woman, but, she said, turning to Hinata with tearful eyes, we need you here. We need your help. It doesn't matter if you turn out not to be a princess, but if you can defeat the Siomi, then please help us. Lily said gravely, we're scared. From beside Heather, all the kids, we don't ever go outside the city gates anymore, and it's boring, and our moms and dads, they don't say anything, but they're scared too. You can tell I don't like it. I want things to go back to the way they were. It's because we're helpless to do anything. We don't have any power to fight these creatures, but you do. You're the only one who has been able to stop the creature, and even more, you're the first person to be able to save a cursed being. Mom said that with your help Asha was finally able to help someone cursed, and maybe now no one else will be cursed, so we're begging you, help us. Hinata remained silent. She allowed the words of these young people, who weren't all that much younger than her, to enter her head and become part of the jumbled chaos of her thoughts, and the path in front of her cleared without much thought. Maybe, Hinata admitted, not as much as she had hoped, but for the time being, she had made up her mind. Heather, Lily, thank you. Feeling a little ashamed of her outburst, Heather glanced down at her feet. For what? For finally treating me like a person, someone capable based on merit and skill, and not on a fable. I truly appreciate it. There was a roar from the city center, and a scream shattered the sky from the square. The three girls noticed the distinctive dark clouds swirling around the area as they looked toward the plaza. An icy wind blew past them, blocking the sun that had just been shining on them. Their spines tingled as the familiar howl reverberated through the atmosphere. With already high emotions, Heather yelled, what was that? Like her sisters, her eyes were wide with fear. Heather asked, but they both knew what it was. Hinata said, don't move. With confidence, knowing that the girls wouldn't dare to move. With a resolute smile on her face, she briefly turned to face the girls before twisting her body to face the chaos. She turned away from them and ran down the street in the direction of the terror, saying, don't worry, I'll protect you. A fathomless ebony body with blood-red eyes, fangs, and claws stood in the center of the plaza, surrounded by people running and screaming for their lives. It seemed unthinkable that a creature as large as that Siomi could have waltzed its way into the middle of such a large and dense mass of people. While Fyra, Fyun, and Amintas attempted to combat and divert the beast, Miela, Jarek, and Hammond assisted the people in escaping down crowded streets. Naruto, who was searching frantically for Hinata, noticed that Iskard was nowhere to be found in the confusion. He cursed himself for leaving her alone, but he never thought one of these hideous creatures would appear here of all places. She was nowhere to be found. He could feel the chill of the Siomi's presence filling the plaza from where he stood on the dais. The stands that were left standing after their vendors left them were shaken by the wind. Frustrated, he gritted his teeth, being unable to use chakra as quickly or from a greater distance as Hinata made him feel worthless in this case. His Rasengan was nearly useless. He wished he could use his Wind Rasenshuriken without hurting himself, but he was aware that this was not possible. He was powerless to stop the Siomi's destruction. As he watched, he simply did not fit in with this kind of foe, and he detested it. Naruto caught a glimpse of it out of the corner of his eye and jumped from the dais onto the cobblestone below. He hurried to a child's aid when he lost contact with his father, catching him and jumping back up as the Siomi swung its tail around to counter Aminta's broadsword attack. The father was holding his arms out wildly as Naruto carried him to a safe spot in the plaza where a side street led off into the distance. He cried as his father tenderly took him in his arms. Thank you, mister, the child said. No problem, kid. Now run, both of you, and hide over there in that building until it's safe, okay? Naruto was left alone in the side street's entrance as the two swiftly obeyed. The Siomi howled piercingly into the black sky as he turned and ran back to the plaza. Now that he had been exposed to it a second time, he could feel it. The chakra Hinata had described, the uncomfortably cold, deadly sensation. When Naruto sensed it, the hair on the backs of his arms and neck stood on end, but the beast was enormous, and he was far from feeling where they should attack. The old strategy of aiming for its chest would not work for this one. As he could tell from where Amintas and Fyra were aiming their strikes, Fyun also failed with the tethered throwing knives. Despite the fact that his area and range were increased, it appeared that they had no real means of harming the Siomi. Then he saw it. He watched it in its entirety from the side street where he stood at the plaza's entrance in the black aura of the Siomi. The white of the cloth that clung to her body appeared to glow ethereally. He could only make out her eyes, that dress, and the gold of the half-sun amulet hanging around her neck in the darkness. Emerging from the side street opposite him, Hinata pushed softly past the crowds of people hurrying to get away from the dangers behind them and headed directly for the monster. She leapt into the air above the Siomi with more accuracy than he had ever seen from her, and then, with her soft fist attack ready beneath her, she let gravity carry her right into the center of the creature's back. Due to its 3 attacks distraction, it had very little time to comprehend what was happening and dodge sideways, narrowly avoiding a full blow but still sustaining a partial attack. Unsteady from its escape, it rolled on the ground and howled in agony. The black of its body appeared to recede back into itself as it continued to howl on its side. Hinata didn't waste time quickly landing from her assault. She leapt back up and ran to the fallen creature. Naruto was taken aback by the ferocity of her advance, which was unlike anything he had ever witnessed from her as before. The peace appeared to begin returning almost instantly after he witnessed her gentle fist attack and the explosive results as the black veil of the Siomi dissipated into the air like acrid smoke when the seemingly simple force of her palm coming into contact with the creature's sunken back. Beams of sunlight shone through the rapidly passing clouds, illuminating the devastation surrounding those who stayed in the plaza. Splinters and ripped rags were all that remained of the little stalls where food and games were being served. Following the appearance of the Siomi, the starlings also dropped food, toys, flags, and other items of joy all over the ground. The plaza appeared to be strewn with the day's very joy, and there was a weight to it all. There was silence, but Naruto's eyes were fixed on Hinata, and when she remained motionless for a minute following her last blow, he rushed to where she was standing. He couldn't see her face because of her hair, hunched shoulders, and lowered head. Naruto approached her and called her name, Hinata, but she did not answer. Hinata, that was amazing. You did it. Are you okay? He said, placing his hand on her shoulder as he approached her. Hinata's eyes glistened with sorrow as she gazed up into Naruto's. For a brief moment, Naruto's stomach lurched, believing Hinata had been injured, but she nodded subtly in the direction she had been searching. Naruto's stomach lurched for yet another reason as he turned his head. The body of a 5-year-old child was found where the Siomi had been this time. There were no obvious scars from Hinata's attack, but the child's chest had 2 sizable holes where the Siomi had attacked and poisoned him, essentially ensnaring him in a never-ending nightmare cycle. Amintas sadly said, Tomas, as he and the other warriors approached from behind. A youngster of the city, loved to be outside the city gates, pretending to be a knight. He was one of the first to disappear when all of this started happening. At least his soul can be put to rest now. Hinata, Naruto started, but he was at a loss for words, and before he could come up with anything, he saw the sluggish crowd gathering around them after the chaos subsided. The starlings that had fled the fighting's carnage began to cautiously and slowly make their way back one by one. They moved forward from the side streets that led off in all directions from the plaza, filling the square until everyone had gathered around the group. With a sigh, Hinata finally looked up at the throng. Everyone was quiet, as though they were afraid to speak, but as the crowd watched Hinata's every move, in wonder at the feat they had only heard about until now, Naruto sensed a sense of reverence coming from them. They were all waiting for her response now, Naruto realized. Unaware that she had made up her mind, he turned to watch her. Hinata just nodded. Meeting his eyes, she couldn't speak to him by herself, in front of the group, or while they were waiting for her answer. She moved past Naruto and the 6 fighters, then onto the dais to their left, where she faced the throng. The plaza was now bright as the sun finally broke through the clouds. She inhaled deeply. Hinata said, in a tone that was reserved but loud enough for everyone to hear, I've made my decision. I am a stranger here, and I feel that every moment I am here. I also have another task I was sent here to do, and I must do my best to make sure I succeed in it, as well. The crowd was silent, save for a few tremors of fear that echoed through the air. I know very little of this place, of you as people, or of the dangers you face. However, Hinata went on, I will not stand by and watch the Siomi curse you all. If I have any power at all, no matter who I am, I must use it to help you. I will join your fight against the Siomi, and I will help rid you all of the dangers you face. At her words, the audience erupted, the thunderous cheer breaking the silence. Sun Princess. Long life to the Sun Princess. We're saved. Sun Princess. They chanted as they all whooped and hurrahed in response to her words. Yes, people of Radina. Iskard had crept out from whatever hole he had been hiding in behind Hinata and crept out beside her, speaking to the starlings as though he had been there the entire time. Our Sun Princess has returned, and she has agreed to help. It is indeed a great day, a cause for celebration. We shall all soon be saved. Now, please try and enjoy the rest of the day. We shall move to the castle and begin our plans. Today marks the beginning of the end of our plague. Long life to the Sun Princess. While the cheering went on, Naruto kept a silent eye on Hinata. She never shied away from the crowd as she used to, and he saw a tiny smile curl her lips. She appeared to have conquered whatever was bothering her mind as the crowd applauded her return and her strength. Iskard led her back down the stage steps and back towards the palace slowly. The Sun warriors glanced at one another. Well, it's settled, Fyun replied. I guess, sooner now rather than later, we will be engaging the enemy head-on. Finally, said Fire as she was unharmed and appeared to be prepared to go again, although her legs were a tangle of scrapes from her frequent sliding attacks on the Siomi. It has been long enough for everyone living in this terror. This will decide our fate. Amintus gave a serious nod. He turned and led the way for the others to follow Hinata and Iskard back to the castle, presumably to decide on a course of action. I hope so, he rumbled softly. Naruto followed them for a step before stopping. He squinted at their backs and bit his lip. The thought of all this made him feel sick to his stomach for some reason. He was certain that Hinata would decide to assist, but based on what he knew about her personality, he didn't anticipate that she would accept their applause so rapidly, and there was another aspect of her voice that baffled him. A part of him felt jealous, more than he wanted to acknowledge, and for some reason that bothered him he was also unable to explain why.